I went to watch UVA last weekend. Actually. So I'm in Brooklyn, and they were playing in Marcus, so I watched the UVA UNC final. And UVA just dominated. I think like it was never really close.
What happened? Like I don't even think the UMCB knows what happened. Like their last game, they lost to like another nobody team by 30 points.
Yeah. Wow. It's amazing. That's why people love sports.
Yeah. Now like Manhattan, everyone is like hyped because they're thinking, oh, we can make it.
It's on mute, that's
Yeah.
why. Now
But
we're
now-
good. Okay, we're gonna try it again. Hold on.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Do it.
It's not much, so
Yeah. So you're
Okay, Franklin, we're now live with an audio
Yeah, I'm
amplification in the room, also it's wireless. So what do you think about that? Is it something that will be satisfactory?
Yeah, so interested in law and for all that is working on PhD in philosophy. So
Okay, where are you?
I was in Leuven, which is in Belgium.
Hold on, just a minute.
University there.
Linda, you're being broadcasted live.
Yeah.
It's
I did my undergrad in college outside of Chicago. So.
Well,
So there's another one.
understand.
I think they're the winners. They're the ones in Massachusetts.
Okay.
What happens?
You're the wheat hunter.
Yeah, really.
And
How you feeling about that?
shaped and sized to focus is good. Okay. Yeah. All right, and you know, from the
Hopefully we won't trip up.
We're all set up.
it's reversed.
You're like the master examiner in broadcasting.
I'm the IT guy.
Cool.
And I don't know what the, I
Thank
think.
you. Saved our lives several times today.
No, it's probably a card. Usually it's a card.
Thank
You
you.
came in all the way from Canada?
I mean, not explicitly for this, but it was a sweet bonus that I found out was going to be.
Cool.
Yeah.
That was
Where you
Tuesday.
That's all company, but we're coming in from Baltimore.
Yeah,
Our company's based out of Brooklyn.
okay.
So,
You both went to UVA.
both went to UVA for law school. Yep, that's where we met, friends there, and then we started this company together.
All over, man. All over.
That's the way it is these days, right?
Mhm.
People did not want to be around.
How about yourself?
You're from Kansas, 2L Law.
Yeah.
I've lived in Kansas a long time. Graduated December. Probably moved down here after I graduated. Yeah. I did a lot of summer
Sorry, I
credits
just added to your burden. You're welcome, God.
and heavy course loads. Just hot one and out.
Yeah, you don't want to stick around Lawrence for another 6 months?
Yeah, it wouldn't be bad,
Lawrence is a
but
nice place.
it's really pretty. I don't mind it. It's just expensive.
Right. So the-
Yeah.
As much as I love working with no income, paying the work security, putting interest on unsubsidized loans.
The whole package is a drink.
I'm just being depressing.
Its range is, it has a big screen, not just a shiny.
Mhm.
So if you stand here.
Oh,
have
ever.
you seen that?
It's exciting.
That's big.
What's a good example? They kind of NCAA tournaments sometimes.
Gorgeous weather.
So far, like, I like the same weather. It's supposed to be good. So we can better.
Thanks.
I'm so thrilled you're here.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah. What's that?
It's
Well, plan one. And then there, pretty open-minded. I want to practice commercial litigation for a while.
Just get out of here.
And then here I can shoot.
You never know. You never know.
I'm just with my show.
It's great.
Guitar, songwriting, singing, I used to play a lot more instruments, but law school.
I can still.
So that kid's probably.
And he was so funny, he introduced himself to one of our hackers here. Will.
So the companies in Brooklyn, you said you live out of Baltimore?
Yeah, currently in Baltimore.
Alright, cool.
We just
I
started
know
helping
Will.
recently.
He talked to you. Just
Spent the last 9 months
just
getting
like
off
kind
the
of
ground. People, so they know.
You can find a contract.
Sorry.
But it's really,
It's a really good time.
he did a really good.
Yeah,
job.
it is. I mean, in general, law it seems like it's kind of the last to catch up to everyone
Yep.
on things like this. And I don't know, like even just now, like Taylor voted to get like a data analytics class approved yesterday. They didn't have one yet. Yeah, and they're like, there's a debate in the administration, like, we need a more traditional curriculum.
Everybody is.
I mean, you
Based upon
you
what-
had no practice on,
No.
like, I took an MMA class, it was entirely about like razor rights, which is something like nobody ever does in real life. It's, completely ridiculous. Academia's got a problem.
Gone wild for hours.
So does the access, I don't link to the legal, but this technology, they're probably sharing.
Yeah.
I'm close to that, like, I think we're about to.
It's gonna have all.
Yeah, because there's so much of it, and I think that's why there's a lot of resistance. I keep doing everything now. Like,
Absolutely.
there's a lot of work that can just be replaced. Even now, it's just like AI burner.
Yeah, you're just riding the sweet wave and it's like driving into the
Why not prepare
It's still there.
I mean, we have the power to sort of
Yes.
do it.
And when
At
I
least
was
that process
there,
is
everyone
difficult.
could see everyone
and it's disruptive and people don't like that.
in this place. It was where all the people who were here were key. Like they, when I left,
Also,
they did
probably
such a hard time, like I got wanted every single
Yeah.
checkpoint, like, well,
they're nice, but they're, you know, they can't do what I do.
So.
Right.
I didn't do it.
Even though you're being shown, they have,
Guys
that
still
they can.
didn't think
I'm special.
from when I was there. And I took my
Mine's always been
Very,
different.
very nostalgic, made me feel super old.
Take mine out, we take that there.
So what?
Yeah. I mean, and it's work, I mean,
Yeah.
listen, all of a sudden, kneecaps, next year or something like that, it's not gonna happen.
I mean, it'll start, making some friends
We can
and start incorporating all this technology, saving money for the clients.
Then started going to market.
We have that on like.
And then eventually it gets to the point like it becomes more efficient, effective than otherwise, then it becomes unethical to not use the programs. It's just
No,
Thirty
you would
states.
never know anything. Sure.
We have to stand back as these standards are available.
Yeah, that, I've been in the middle for a reason.
But then the question, are you?
Yeah, how do they define that? You never see that in like the suspension, like this.
Right. There's no bright line test. You're not even
So
certain.
you guys obviously.
It could be.
There's been 79 on the weight that was suspended. Like,
For
yeah.
fixing your job,
Talking about you.
riding on a bike.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm not using an iPad.
My wife was just kind of talking to me.
But you know what? Now that we're talking, if I am the it probably is more.
There's lots of food over there, so don't let it go to waste.
Oh, yeah. Good. And I know sometimes it actually
She's
slows
going
down,
on.
so like I'm working at the prosecutor's office in Topeka right now,
And
and
then
they
go up
recently
the hall.
adopted a few years ago, it's like full
No,
blown software. It puts like up the whole docket, we're charged with gunshots, history, and you have to like go through a program but all the judges, all the clerks are investing, just like asking my hand, like lectures before having to move around all this.
Never know.
Sanjeev, can I ask that, go ahead and turn on the audio now?
Here's a second.
Oh, it's on?
Yeah, that should be.
Oh, there it is.
Yep.
You getting an indication that it's not working? Oh, okay.
That's
good.
So everybody just understand, we're gonna start promptly at 9, and whoever's here is here. But we've got an audience that's globally watching, so we're gonna honor their time and our
No
time.
pressure, no pressure.
But I did put a couple more in.
How's it going?
No, okay. It was the only, they were the only slides that I was trying to find.
So JT, that's what you
Yes.
Just for, you know.
Yeah, what about you?
I'm from here. Have no,
Right. Just the discussions.
Been a long time.
Yeah, just so you like it.
I mean, just sometimes.
You mean, like, undergrad before, or?
Yeah, my background is in administrative.
Yeah, thank you.
I am.
You're back over there?
Fair enough. Yeah, that's hilarious. Like my path is kind of similar to mine, just like philosophy. You can't go to law school. It's over like I was asleep while I was in the garage.
Yeah, that's what I said.
At least that's
I really.
Yeah, it's, whatever, I don't know what anybody else said. Well,
Searching for.
Yeah, I mean, it's,
I told you.
and like, I should have said 10 times. Like, yeah, every little point you get like another $8,000.
This is my house, is there, Adrian?
There's-
What do you call yourself?
There is, the blog post was about that. The blog post that read. He pointed out the typo in.
What do you call yourself?
Yeah.
But this is, well, this is
Well, folks, I'm gonna ask you to find your food. I'm gonna ask you to just be as informal as you want. This is a fun day. But you also need to know that right now, whatever you're saying is being heard by a global audience. So you might want to be a little quieter than you are at the present, because we're broadcasting to the world. So I'm just letting you know that we're starting officially. And as people continue to join us, we certainly welcome. I'm Larry Bridge-Smith, and I happen to be one of the co-organizers of the Music City Legal Hackers. We've been in existence for 3 years. Just for the sake of those of us who are here, how many hackers from the Music City who are here? I see 1, 2, about 40. That's what I see. That's for the sake of the audience who can't see the audience. We have a handful of folks who've made this possible, and so great gratitude goes out to them. But you also need to know that this is a global activity. There are literally 47 different cities across the globe that are engaged in some form of activity today. Just give you a picture of what that looks like. This is pretty awesome. That's not it. Maybe this is. Yeah, that's it. Every one of those nodes has gathered at some point over last night through tomorrow. Some of them are like us. We're just here to get our minds around some of these basic concepts of blockchain, smart contracts. Some of them have been working since last night, wherever last night was for them, and wherever 9 o'clock this morning is for them, which could have been for us last night. You know, it gets kind of crazy when you start talking global. Some of those have been doing hacks, because there are about 9 challenges that have been posted, and I haven't looked lately to see, because we have one posted, and I hope that by the end of tomorrow at the same hour, we have a solution to one of the biggest problems that AI faces, and that's how can you get more data and protect it at the same time. So that's the democratization of legal data challenge that we've sponsored, which we're delighted to see if somebody wants to take that on. But if they don't, we will. And as a result, that's why we're glad you're here. We're not going to solve that problem today, but if somebody wants to prototype a solution, that's what hacking's all about. It's not creating technology necessarily, but it's creating a path to create the technology. And as we know, in this world, no longer is it adequate to be the smartest person in the room, because there isn't any of those anymore. The smartest person in every room is the person that can learn from every other person in that room. And that's the way things are going to go with greater and greater speed, because there's no longer a primacy on privacy that could better be shared. Now, there's always going to be a primacy on privacy that can't be shared. And that confidentiality, the governments are beginning to regulate very, very strictly, as we see in the European Union. with the new regulations that go into effect in May. And many US companies, if they have a delivery of any sort of web-based service in Europe, they've got to comply whether they know it or not. And as a result, we've got a lot of opportunity to both mess things up and improve things by the way in which we get the job done. And that's what we're here to try to begin to do. So, back to the reasons for being. What? Who was that? They must be talking to us. So what we're going to do in this group today is more focused than hacking, because we have some phenomenal experts to join us. We're going to hear from them in turn. Some of them will be live and in person. Some of them will be coming from Switzerland or Dallas, but they'll be speaking to you and through our marvels of technology to the world who's watching. And I'm really grateful that they would choose to do that. But there are some essences of who we are, and I would ask for anybody who's able to reach it on both sides of the room. There are our standards, our norms of behavior, just so you know how we're operating today. Because none of us are here to sell anything. None of us are here to ask you to buy anything. This is an open source, open field place where people are intended to simply learn and share information for the good of all, not for the good of one or two or a few, which is what I think makes the legal hacking community so uniquely different. There are 60 chapters worldwide of legal hackers. They're virtually on every continent, increasingly in many countries. And if you've never been familiar with the phrase, it's those of you who are technologists certainly know what hacking is, bad or good, but hacking began as a white hat activity to try to find things that would solve the problems that technology wasn't solving itself. And then along came the dark web and black hats. We're white hats. And when we say legal hackers, the focus of our hacking is on matters related to the delivery of legal services, because I believe everybody that I've met that's in this endeavor is convicted that the adequacy of access to justice is wholly, wholly deplorable. We have to do a better job than just provide access to justice for those who can pay $1,000 an hour attorney's fees. That's completely wrong. And the legal hacking community exists to begin to solve that problem for the benefit of all, which is why we do everything at no cost and at no revenue, but for the sake of all. So we're going to talk about that at the last part of the day. I want to share something that I think is really critical in terms of how this globe has shifted because of the technology that many of you are familiar with. So just get a sense, how many of you are technologists, developers, engineers? About half. How many of you are lawyers? About half. Okay, we've got about a half and half deal. How many of you are both? Yeah, that's what I wanted to see. About a third of you, I would suggest. See, they think this is an audience of 200. So that's our secret, because they can't see you. So a third of our audience here in Nashville are both lawyers and technologists, as am I. And I add a third hat to me because I also get to play, it's a part that I play. They let me call myself professor, but I'm not a professor. I'm a pracademic, not an academic. And so what I love to do is meet where the law and theory intersect. And that's, to me, where technology resides. So it's those three hats that I get to wear, and I'm having the time of my life. But we also have others who will be here. We're going, if you want to look at our agenda, just go to the nclegalhackers.org website. That agenda is there. We'll follow it as closely as we can. This is being recorded. It will be packaged for later rebroadcast. So if you miss anything or want to see it again, it will be available to you, as will every other live feed that's been captured around the world. So you could literally spend the rest of the year looking at what's being generated today if you chose to do that. And I think we have, honestly, the best. The folks who are here today are just the best. And so I'd like to go ahead and get started with that and tell you a little bit about my newest friend. No, not my newest friend. I've met a few friends since I met Justin. But Justin Hectus he's an IT guy, and he works in a law firm. And I got to tell you, I've been in law for 40 years, and I've been in a lot of law firms, too many to count, I'm afraid. And the IT guy was always the most beleaguered person on the planet, because there was no way to bring IT and lawyers together to see the same thing the same way. And the lawyers owned the place. And the lawyers said to the IT guy or gal, "You're a non-lawyer. You don't count." Well, that's changing radically because technology has become so critically important. And so we, in our vernacular, have banned the word non-lawyer and have embraced the word legal professional. Regardless of your discipline, you're a legal professional if you're bringing your professional skills to the business of law for the benefit of clients. So for our purposes today, we're all legal professionals. Some of us have law licenses. Many of us, I'd say most of us don't. But we're here because we're engaged in the same pursuit. And that's what the Computational Law and Blockchain Festival is all about. We're not making you get out your hacking clothes and hack, but if you wanted to leave here and go down the hall and do that, you're welcome to do that, because there are some challenges that could use your attention. So I'm going to put on the board, as I'll turn it over to our next guest, our websites that you can access us, our Twitter handles, because we want you to be able to tweet to your heart's content, our hashtags, because we want to create a storify of today, and the more we are using consistent nomenclature, the more likely that becomes. So I'll take care of that while our next guest is telling us the incredible story of a law firm that decided IT doesn't have to be a cost center. Because of the talent and the gifts and the skills of Justin Hectus, there's a law firm that has turned IT in the law firm to a profit center. And I would suggest, why aren't all law firms doing that? Why aren't law firms using the technology that they have at their own disposal to generate revenue? They will. And you know why they will? Because Justin's teaching them. So Justin, please come.
No pressure, and any of our partners are watching on the webcast. We're not in the black yet, but we're trending that way. Do you have a clicker? One thing, since we're talking about blockchain and Larry opened the door, since others will be talking more about blockchain, since Larry opened the door on the challenges with the European Union General Data Protection Regulation, one thing that we've talked about quite a bit recently that I think is interesting is, how do you reconcile something that is designed to be immutable with the personal right to be forgotten? And if you've got a blockchain solution that has my personal data, what are you going to do when I come to you and say, I don't want you to have my data anymore. I want you to destroy it permanently, and that's my individual right, and you have to comply. So I leave that as an open-ended question. I don't have an answer for it, but I think that's indicative of the challenges that we're facing today. And for those of you who are here for the two presentations on Friday, I tried to mix it up a little bit, but some of this will be repetitive, so I apologize. If you want to take it off course with a question, I would welcome it. I'm going to talk today about three different things, three different major topics: the computerization of the workforce, the impact that it's having on legal, the impact that technology in general is having on legal, all the disruption there, and then how we're adapting as one human and one law firm. And when we talk about computerization of the workforce, it's easy to find examples of this. Text preparers, bank tellers, although I did hear the counterpoint to that on Friday, travel agents. Automation is coming, robotics, robots, AI, there's a lot of evidence that it's coming for the white collar worker today, not just in fulfillment centers like Amazon. It's coming to financial services companies. Financial services companies are becoming technology companies. Goldman Sachs is a third of their workforce that are computer programmers. JP Morgan Chase has undertaken significant initiatives to take hours off of lawyer timesheets and into computer programs. We see that with our broker-dealer clients and automated trading. We see it in our shipping clients. We've got one in the Port of Long Beach that's a fully automated terminal. And you can imagine what that's happening to that's doing the workforce. It's also problematic from the perspective of a law firm that helps clients with problems when they have casualties and catastrophes. This is great news for shipping that automation is coming, and it sounds like by 2020 we're going to have coast to coast autonomous ships. But the top causes for liability loss are human error. So you can see how that's going to be disruptive for the legal market. It's going to take us some time to adjust and focus on other ways that we can help clients. And when you look at this impact and how, not just how significant it's going to be, but how quick it's going to come for the white collar worker, one of the best places to go is this report from January of 2016 from the World Economic Forum. They predicted that 7 million white collar jobs would be lost, 2 million white collar jobs would come online based on new technologies like robotics. But that the most important thing is that they say that this fourth industrial revolution is going to happen so fast that we just don't have time to retool the way that we did in previous industrial revolutions. So there's a sense of urgency. There's also a total disconnect when we look at this from the perspective of individuals, because people agree that robots are coming for our jobs. 65% of people say they think computers will do much of the work of the current workforce in 50 years, but 80% say that won't happen to my job. So we tend to think, not me, lawyers particularly think, I'm special. Computer technologists think, my job can't be replaced. But I think it's really important to look at this atomization of what we do and not look at things from the perspective of I'm a lawyer, or I'm a paralegal, or I am a technologist. But there are a number of different functions that I do. Some of those are going to be less and less relevant. Some of those are going to be increasingly relevant. One way to look at what I think will likely be more and more relevant is going back to this 2013 seminal paper on the computerization of the workforce that came out of Oxford. They actually broke down the components that would make a job likely to be computerizable, that would most likely to make you be replaced by a robot. So they broke that down into a formula and an algorithm, and then they actually have it in the appendix a percentage likelihood that you're going to get replaced by a computer or automation. The really happy story in this paper, and which otherwise sounds pretty brutal, is that the tasks that are most difficult to be replaced by robots in the foreseeable future are the tasks that make us the most human. Perception and manipulation, creative intelligence, social intelligence. These are the things that are going to make us resilient as members of the workforce. So I think overall a really, really positive story and something that I'll try to hit on multiple times during this discussion. So how are these new technologies and these new market forces impacting the legal market? There has been, for years, there's this great Throwback Thursday column that I think it's Brad Blickstein's doing on his LinkedIn page right now, and he posted something from 1992 the other day that said, the billable hour is dead. The billable hour is going away, and then there was another one about automation and, it's like, or AI, and you hear these things, and if you look back, there's evidence that we have thought these things were coming for a really long time. But I think today is different, and there's a number of pieces of really strong evidence that that's the case. Number one, there's less demand for legal services today than there was in 2007. This is down or negative growth year over year or flat year over year for 10 years in a row. So there's less demand for legal services today than there ever than there was in 2007. It's a buyer's market, which has created this tremendous rate pressure. So this is average billable hours worked, and we show 134 average billable hours per month in 2007 to 122 through the late part of 2016, and that creates this. Sorry, hold on, let me flip through. And the other piece of this that's happening in I think a non-cyclical way is the increase of in-house lawyers. It used to be that in-house departments would staff up and staff up to deal with problems, and then the problems would get resolved, and then they would lay people off, and then new problems would come in, and they'd have this overflow of work, and would all go to the outside law firms, and that cycle repeated multiple times. It doesn't seem to be the case, at least today, that law firms are getting better and better at becoming fully capable of taking care of their problems through smart staffing, relationships with outside counsel, and relationships with alternative legal service providers. Alternative legal service providers, those are non-law firms, law companies, what Elevate likes to call them, are now doing 10% of the work that used to go to outside law firms. So you can see all these things kind of coming together. And again, rather than looking at this as something that's likely cyclical and will turn around, people who are really smart at Georgetown Law and Peer Monitor from Thomson Reuters say that these changes are foundational and in all likelihood largely irreversible. And I think there's a strong sense that that is the case. And for us, one way of looking at that as a law firm is that it's resulting in this stratification of legal services, that there are certain pieces of work, not all lawyer work, certainly not the majority of legal work, but some pieces of legal work that can be commoditized. Maybe don't even require a lawyer. Definitely really matters how much it costs. Then there are some things that, sort of ordinary course of business. There's a lot of lawyers out there who can handle this work. And so rate pressure is incredibly important. And then when you get over to the far end of the spectrum where we all would like to be, it's the more bespoke, complex, bet the company type stuff, where the client really doesn't care as much how much it costs because it is so critical. And so, as human lawyers, we want to skew towards this side of the spectrum, but there's also some opportunity, I would argue, to take a piece of the commoditized work through technology, process, automation, and that's one of the areas where we're choosing to focus today. So how does this affect the law firm structure? And if you think about the law firm yesterday, by the way, this is from Boston Consulting Group about 2.5 years ago. It's a great model, I think. The law firm of yesterday is very much a pyramid model, leveraging additional lower cost resources. So you have partners at the top making a lot of money, of counsel and associates in the middle, and maybe paralegals at the bottom, all sort of feeding that machine. And there's increasing support for a law firm that is disaggregated by automation and outsourcing today. And then the model that I think we as a firm are getting to actually today is this more rocket ship shape, where you do have partners, associates, paralegals, but you've also got project managers, technology managers, a lot of legal technology built in, really strong and integrated strategic partnerships with outside partners, and those could be technology companies or legal service, alternative legal service providers for local counsel, or for maxing up for work, or for technology solutions, and then cooperations with counsels and outside counsel and legal groups. That's really kind of the model. I think that's more flexible and more consistent with an agile law firm today. A little bit about our firm. We take great pride in the way that we've been adapting to the market. And this is just a little bit of information from one of our client communication decks. And we really are involved and invested not just in our community, but in our relationships with each other. We have 85% of our lawyers, their first job out of law school was at our firm, and they're still there today. So we're a group of people that knows each other, and one of the benefits, I think, knows, trusts, and loves each other, I think, to a large degree. And one of the benefits of that is this concept of viewing complex problems with different perspectives and getting to a better result. And this is kind of getting back to the name of the talk, the parallax view. For those of you not familiar with the concept, two different people can look at exactly the same problem in this case and see two very different viewpoints. Doesn't mean either one of them is wrong. That they're both right in their own way, but by marrying those two perspectives, you can get a better and more accurate result. And it takes a shared language, and again, I'll talk about that in a little bit. This perspective, by the way, I think has really resulted, this ability for me to go to lawyers in the firm and say, I think we should do this, and for them to say, you know, I don't necessarily agree. Sometimes I don't really necessarily understand, but I trust you, so therefore we're going to do it. And for me to get shut down occasionally and have the same response back, I think is really material in the way that we've been able to accomplish things. And it results in a really adaptive workforce with a culture of continuous improvement. And, you know, just throw these up here. One of my favorite things about working at the firm today is that we will often get pulled into engagements where there'll be a lawyer. You know, one of the projects that I'm going to tell you about in a few minutes was run by me, a technology guy or a business process guy at least, a 40-year paralegal and a second-year lawyer, and it was awesome. And those three perspectives are very, very different, but it came together very well. Same thing with our certified e-discovery specialists are ingrained in every litigation matter that's open at the firm. We have what we call a CCM, or a certified e-discovery specialist consulting meeting at the beginning of every litigation matter, so that they can tell the lawyers about you know, any jurisdictional requirements or any client preferences, or are there specific vendors we need to use because of the client. And that relationship, I think, is really a good example of how having somebody with a different perspective pays dividends over the course of a matter. So this commitment to evolution as a law firm has been evidenced by, we talked about this yesterday, our friend Casey Flaherty came to us several years ago and said, you know, you guys think you're so badass, why don't you prove it? And so he put us through his legal tech assessment, which was a fun experience. And as you can see by his article right here, we were the first firm to pass. And then likewise, we've really tried to max the course on credentials in e-discovery, certified ethical hacking, and cybersecurity, and privacy. And then we've got some really tight relationships with development partners. One thing I'll mention too, just, you know, going back to that Oxford paper that predicts doom for a number of professions, there was a really interesting observation that was made during the conversation on Friday, and that was about VHS tapes, and about how, as VHS tapes were becoming obsolete, the few stores that still have VHS tapes, the demand for their services went way up at the very end. And I'm sure those people were like, wow, this is great. You know, we're never gonna go out of business. The same thing I think can happen to us if we mistake current demand for future demand. And we're seeing, you know, we've got one, put this article up because it's brand new, it's out in the current ILTA magazine, but also it was written by my friend and colleague Janice Jaco, who was a secretary at the firm, was a paralegal at the firm, and then about 10 years ago, she just saw, you know, my job is really changing, and I can see that my job today is not going to be my job, you know, 5 years from now. So she invested time in becoming a certified e-discovery specialist, and she's had that same conversation with herself over the last 3 or 4 years, and she's transitioned into cyber certifications and really focusing on a broader set of skills. Not to say that any of those professions are going away or immediately, but I think that evolution is really important, something that we'd all be well served to invest in. Again, getting back to this parallax view, this quote from the book Smart Collaboration, I think, is really important to focus on, that especially when we're talking about that stratification of legal services and where we want to be on the complex side. Complex problems are too difficult to be solved by any one person, any one perspective, any one skill set. And we believe, I'm betting my career on the fact that being in a very diverse group with diverse perspectives can bring a better solution and better work. And that's all based on this. It's all based on having a shared language, shared intention, shared benefit, and then transparency and trust, most importantly, trust. And this, I think, extends from, you know, these two insipid faces happen to work in a law firm, But this extends to vendor partners, it extends to clients, and when we're tackling really complex problems, we need to have this type of relationship. One way that this has benefited, helped us, I think, over the years is in terms of the maturation of our IT group. And as Larry pointed out, today we're really focused on, how can we surprise and delight clients with services that they wouldn't expect? How can we sell services that maybe you wouldn't expect from a law firm? How can we productize lawyer knowledge and industry-specific knowledge and deliver that at a really low unit cost? So that's what we're focusing on today, and I would argue that it only happens because of the trust factor. So sorry if I'm beating that one to death, but I'm going to beat it to death a little
Beat
bit
it harder.
So I'm going to pedal through these very quickly. There are a number of benefits to having this mature, because I've got 20 minutes, right? Or is it, how many?
Take 30.
Okay, great.
Don't worry about it.
Okay, great. If anybody else disagrees and wants me to just stop right now. I think I won't read this to you, but because I've covered a lot of these points, but I think this is probably my most important point. I'm hoping to end my career at this firm because I'm having fun, and because whenever I go to any of our partners and say, hey, you know what we should do? Even if it sounds like a crazy idea, they're at least willing to entertain me, and often they're willing to just go for it. And this extends beyond the business model. This goes into play when I say, I really think it would help our community if we did X, or I really think that this would be fun. We're not going to make any money on it, but we should do it. And we get that kind of support. So, I would argue that that's a valuable approach. Just to kind of underscore this, I'm gonna pedal through some really short case studies. Some of these are new for those of you who were here on Friday. We have a group that is dynamic in nature. It's not the same people every project or every month, but we have a group that we call the Agents of Change. And those are the people who kind of raise their hand and say, I'm interested in this. This sounds great. I want to be involved. And again, it changes from time to time. It's usually the same people, you can imagine, right? One of the ways that that's benefited us recently is we have, as part of our Cloud 2020 initiative, we've implemented Box. The way that we did this, I'll go back and forth here. The way that we rolled Box out was we focused on quick wins with virtual data room, large file transfer, and then archiving using their governance tools so we can automatically enforce information governance guidelines. Then we went into this experimentation phase. So this was when I sold the project internally, I said, this is our ROI. Let's just if we get this, it's a win. And then let's roll it out to a bunch of people who are interested in just screwing around and just see what they do. So that resulted in one of our people saying, I can use this for our contracts management system, and I can use it not only to store those contracts, but I can also use it to manage our obligations, because Box has a very configurable metadata template feature so that you can go in and say, this contract has these 10 parameters. And then that helps you not only follow up when a contract is coming up for renewal, or do things like shift ownership of the contract to a new contract owner when the prior contract owner is terminated. So, really important things. But it also allows you to just do simple things like go in and search and say, I care about the ISP contracts. Which ISP contracts are coming up for renewal in 2019? And that was something that was not sold by Box. It was just something that came out of this process right here. And I think that the people who are engaged in this type of process, they see this as really fun. We're going to put up some bumpers, and then we're just going to see what you can do. We're also seeing that type of engagement on workflow automation. Connie Brenton, who's the founder of Clock, challenged us about a year and a half ago to use the same tools they were using in-house for their outside counsel matter assignment workflow, and take that in-house and create a mirror so that when we take in a new file from a client, what do we do and how do we do it? We assign the team, we put it into accounting, we create a budget, we set up alerts for the budget, we put in our CRM, we have engagement letter, docketing, conflicts, the whole conflict system. Any rate exceptions have to go to the executive director, and then this CCM process that I described earlier. And that process not only connects a bunch of different people who all need the same information in order to do their jobs properly, but the process of building this thing was better than the result of the process, just because it engages people, gets them excited. It allows them an opportunity to have an opinion about something that they know more about than I do. So, this is a fun type of a project. And we've extended that to our clients. We've got one series of several thousand customer complaints, pre-litigation, that we created a workflow around that goes back and forth between us and our client. We looked at it over the course of a year. It touches a total of 250 different individuals. It's very low value, commoditizable legal work, but it's important to have lawyers do it. And we just took an approach that any software developer would take. We did a current state analysis, we did a goal state analysis, and then we built a bridge in between using this ThinkSmart platform with discovery, prototype, iterate, user acceptance testing, deploy, iterate, improve. And that's been a ton of fun. We've built a lot of things on this ThinkSmart workflow platform. It's called ThinkSmart Automation Platform, or TAP. And one of the reasons we're really excited about it is they continue to build these APIs that are increasingly seamless, so that you can just pick up, we're doing one right now with Box, so you can pick up pieces or deliver pieces to different applications with great ease. Another project that we're working on right now that I'm really excited about is, it's actually changed pretty dramatically in the last 24 hours, but a proposal for a self-service legal portal for in-house counsel, so that when business customers inside the company come to the legal department, they typically go in, but they would go into this portal that we're building. They go in knowing what their problem is, but they might not know what the solution is. So we're building an engine that would help them get to what the right solution is. I'm going to engage with somebody. I know I need a confidentiality agreement. Well, there might be like 7 different flavors of that. So let's help you through that process in an automated fashion. And if you want one of the NDAs that's super simple and doesn't even need approval, then we're going to create it automatically, and we're going to create it self-service, e-signature ready format, give it back to you, and then that way only the outlier requests come to a human in legal. And when the humans deliver those back, they go back through the portal, so that you get value both out of an analysis of the data analysis, so you can see, okay, we're getting a lot of requests for X. Let's see if we can automate that, and also so that you can create a more rich knowledge base. Goal of this project is obviously, most importantly, to free up valuable human resources so that they can work on higher value, more complex issues. We're also excited about being involved in this CLOC cybersecurity initiative. For those of you who don't know CLOC, Corporate Legal Operations Consortium, you should know it because it's changing the legal industry. And we were asked to give a State of the Union at the initial meeting, and then we're going to be participating in the same discussion at the CLOC Institute. Our focus is really on this challenge that we have against that backdrop that I described at the beginning, the disruption in the legal market, how crazy things are right now. There's also this tremendous shortage of qualified cybersecurity resources. There's a lot of crazy estimates out there, and I'll touch on them in a minute, but the evidence is really strong, empirically and anecdotally, that people who work in cybersecurity, there's not enough of them that are highly qualified, and they're super stressed out. Like, burnout rate is really high. They're looking for new jobs. And this survey from Ponemon, I think they got 700 responses from CISOs. The top responses: my job will be more stressful. I'm going to be in a new job with the same company, but not in IT security. I'm going to completely change careers. I'm going to be in a new job in a new company, not in IT security, right? So you got to get to number 5 before I receive a promotion. Then I will be demoted or terminated. I will retire. My job will become less stressful. So 9% people, I would argue those people are not paying attention. So you've got a already stressed out resource that is in short supply. And what are we doing? We're making them focus on third-party vendor risk assessments from clients, and we're making them provide those same risk assessments to our vendors. So we have this many-to-many relationship where people like me are filling out paperwork over and over again that largely is the same from audit to audit for different clients for the same purpose. And so what we're trying to do is come up with a standard and a clearinghouse that would allow us to do that once or maybe twice per year, update it as needed, and then it would be served up to anybody with authorization. In the broader market, as I said, there's this shortage. The statistics are shocking, but but well-formed, and I've seen it as high as like 2.5 million jobs that are either unfilled or filled by underqualified people by 2020. So IBM came out with a solution to this called the New Collar Initiative, and what they said was it's a huge mistake to put somebody through a 4-year school and try to get them into the cybersecurity workforce. That's not the right path. What you need is a trade school path. You need to get young people who excel in science, technology, engineering, and math. You need to identify them in high school, put them in a 2-year program, and then get them into an apprenticeship. And that's the right way to fill this, to plug this hole. So we're working with the city. I'm a commissioner for technology and innovation for the city of Long Beach. And we're working with city colleges to try to build this program in a manner that's consistent with what IBM suggests, including internships and having a real journeyman path. And something I think that's really exciting for a lot of reasons. One, I think it's the right solution to this. Two, it has great implications for socioeconomically diverse and challenged communities. And the city college network is already geared up to help. They're focused on how do we get people employed and how do we get them higher wages. And so we think that this is the right formula for success. And this is another example of doing things outside the company that I think are exciting because we've got that good relationship. I would say the same thing, just as a side note about, Larry's comment about social justice, access to justice. There are a lot of in-house legal teams, and because the in-house legal teams are focused on it as a priority, some law firms are doing it just for the good, but law firms are also focused on it. So if you have an initiative that's in that area and you want to get some support, I would argue that you could get out there and get a lot of meaningful support. And I'm happy to connect the dots with you if you want to know. But today, just kind of to wrap this thing up, one of the things we're talking about, or others will be talking about a lot, is blockchain. And so I just wanted to touch on that briefly. We're seeing tremendous interest in blockchain, cryptocurrency, obviously, but even going back 3 or 4 years, there was a lot of agreement that the underlying technology of blockchain has a lot of applications. And we're seeing tons of investment. These are financial services firms with significant investments leading into blockchain as of March of 2017. There's also, if you're not familiar with, this is a great, by the way, if you're looking for CV Insights, I don't know if anybody knows them, awesome resource. It's just like super interesting newsletter, fun and funny, but also like great, like kind of finger on the pulse of what's happening with investments. If you're not following that, you should. I love you, Anand, if you're watching. And we're seeing it with our clients. We have clients that have significant and in-place blockchain initiatives for supply chain, for bonds, and for cryptocurrency. These are clients we're working with today, and their businesses are being fundamentally changed by these technologies. This is a great infographic from the use case that Maersk did with IBM, which would be a fun one to look at if you haven't looked at it. And then I'll just show you, this is from a presentation that we did for one of our clients, where me and one of our technology partners from ThinkSmart and one of our lawyer partners from inside the firm presented several use cases on smart contracts. We actually did a couple things that were fun. We did use cases on smart contracts, including how we might be able to look at a POC with e-billing, and also how it would affect the supply chain. Things like tightening the insurance window, knowing that when your goods are on the ship, maybe the insurance stops, and when they come off the ship, the insurance starts again. But we went through use cases in every aspect of the supply chain. But we also talked about the ethical implications. The lawyer that came with me talked a lot about, if you have a technologist on their own in a back room programming these automatically executable contracts, is that unauthorized practice of law? There's all these interesting questions that are coming up. But this thing I thought was such a great quote. This is from the guy who is the co-founder of the Harvard Business School Digital Initiative. And I love this. The time to experiment is now. There's all this evidence that this could fundamentally change whole industries, right? But we don't really know. The jury's still out a little bit, but this I love. If we could all have a little bit of these things, then we could all find time to experiment more and probably get to some cooler solutions. So that's it. Any Anything else? Any questions? Are we good?
Do you have any questions? Want me to
Any
switch
questions?
over?
Yeah, sure.
Questions? Feel free.
Anything? Sorry for talking so fast. Yes, sir.
So you mentioned the smart contracts, but maybe I'm the person far from the legal area, so it's not really clear what the implication do you see in this area. So the basic what the smart contract is, I can understand.
Yeah, we're gonna get to that next, okay?
But the use cases that you probably it would be covered later, so it's fine.
Yeah, let's see if it's covered now, and if not, I'll give you my answer, which may not be as good as what we're gonna get from whoever's next.
Whoever that is.
Yeah, but yeah, I'd love to talk with you about it. Sure.
That is one of our primary reasons for being here today. So just so you understand, this conference is called, can I have your mic?
Oh, yes, sure.
The Computational Law and Blockchain Festival, which really covers an enormous amount of territory. But what we're going to begin to see next are people who are working on the blockchain and smart contract side of this question. What Justin introduced us to was the wide range within which the whole area of computation and law has already made a phenomenal shift. By the end of our time together, I think we'll begin to pull the pieces together. And as everybody has now recognized that food is to eat, not stare at, so help yourself. And on this side, there's drinks, no adult drinks, just regular people drinks. And please help yourself and feel free to leave, get up, do whatever you need to do, stretch your legs. Any questions about logistics or anything? Yeah.
I'm sorry, I have one for Justin.
Yeah, go ahead.
Are you having any, you're saying that you're getting a lot of buy-in from the partners of the firm, obviously. Are you having to, I guess, educate your clients as you go, or are you having any difficulty kind of educating your clients saying, hey, listen, because it's kind of like bringing the car to people when they want a faster horse, and you're saying, this is something that we can provide to you. Are you having difficulty kind of getting people to buy in, or are they buying in willingly?
It's a range. So we have clients who definitely, if you ask them what they wanted, they would say, I want a faster horse.
Right.
But they're receptive to, everybody agrees that we're in a time of great change and in a time of great uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
Different agreement on what the right next step is. That Ask Legal portal came to us from a client. So some clients are very much focused on like, well, what can we do that's going to not only take us to the next step, but build a foundation for when AI really comes into play.
Right.
So there's people who are on that end of the spectrum. On the other end of the spectrum, they're still willing to listen. It's a fun conversation.
Okay.
Well, with that and people now getting their nourishment, let me introduce you to a real champion in this world. Casey Kuhlman, you just never know where you're going to find him. I find him all over the place. And when I asked him where he was today, he said Edinburgh, and I almost lost it because I love Scotland and he's there among my people. But he also lives in the Netherlands and he has places in Switzerland, but he's going to be in any place in the world at any moment in time and has been since he graduated law school in 2008 from Vanderbilt Law School. So he's one of our proud alums. No, we're proud of this alum, I think is a better way to say it. Because he created, among other things over the course of that journey, Monex. And that is the monex.io, if you want to find it, a blockchain smart contract application. And they are going great guns. And I want to talk to you a little bit later about why would they be here and Claus, who's next, and what's that all about? Well, I think there's a reason for that. And that's why we want to be able to be sure that we get all of the perspectives that we can. What is it that we're looking for, Justin?
Pragmatic solutions.
What? No, pragmatic solution comes down the road. But it's the parallax, right?
The parallax.
Yeah, the parallax view, the view that comes from everybody having a different perspective on exactly the same thing. Because they're different and I need to learn from you. So Casey, can you talk and we can at least find out if we've got our volume good?
Hello, everyone.
Try us again.
Hello.
Can you hear him?
Yes.
Try this again, Casey.
All right.
Better? A little bit better.
Good, I keep talking.
Yeah, would you do that? That way we'll know if we're actually hearing ourselves or you. Go ahead, try some more talk.
The last time I was looking at this room, I was on the other side, looking at the legal ethics professor, if I remember correctly. So those were quite a few years ago now.
Well, I think.
How's volume 2 going?
Yeah, we're going to be fine with it. I'm just going to make another adjustment, but you can go ahead. And he wanted to be able to see you as you see him. So we're doing the best we can with all of that. We don't have a wide angle lens, but he sees enough of you. Go ahead,
Much
Casey.
better than staring at the screen or the back of the room, which often happens when one is giving a presentation. It's a pleasure to virtually meet everyone. It's always nice to have links back to Vanderbilt. I'd like to start today by saying something that I think might be a little bit controversial. If I'm totally honest, I'm not sure that all the time I believe what I'm about to say, but most of the time I believe it. And that statement is that if I look across most of legal tech today, I think it's all bullshit. And the reason that I think that it's bullshit is because it is mostly tech today is essentially about allowing legal services providers to slightly efficiently continue to do the same thing that they have been doing for the last 2 generations of lawyers. It is not unlike FinTech and InsurTech and RegTech and a lot of other sort of vertically specific, technologically enabled environments. Legal tech is incredibly navel-gazing. It is not about making the customers of legal services and legal products do something a little bit more effectively, more efficiently. It's really very much focused on the lawyers themselves. And for the most part, it's how can we essentially do the exact same thing we were doing before. And a lot of this is not necessarily the problem of legal tech startups or legal tech incumbents. It's not necessarily their fault. It is fundamentally links to one of the biggest problems that I think that we within the legal industry and legal tech industry writ large have, which is that at a real fundamental level, law as a practice and as a business function, and mostly for the rest of this time, I'm going to talk about legal as a business function. Legal is not digitized. There are a lot of laptops in the room. Even when I was in law school, nearly every lawyer had a laptop. In fact, I think everyone did. And while lawyers have laptops, lawyers use computers, lawyers typically live on their computers, unless one might be a litigator. And even then, at the entry levels, one is living on a computer. All that said, at a fundamental level, transactional law especially is not digitized. And I don't mean digitized is that we can email Word documents back and forth. I mean at a real fundamental level, can we digitize what a contract is? And I would argue that in most of the cases, most of the time, no, we do not. And this is really for a particular reason, in our opinion and others, and that is that legal as a business function exists at an interface point between one company or individual and another. But predominantly, I'm talking about transactional law here and transactional law. So at the interface of our company, another company is typically where legal sits, and legal is responsible for building agreements that operate between companies and across companies. And this factor is why we have really been functionally unable to digitize the legal us to work across companies in a collaborative manner. Typically, data management solutions such as databases, distributed databases, and other data management solutions are built under the assumption that one legal entity will be running them. They might run across multiple machines, but those machines will be operated by a single company or legal entity. It's the fundamental assumption from a technical perspective that we often take. And so now we get to blockchain and sort of blockchains, hashtag blockchains, what are they? And if you ask any 10 blockchainers, what is a blockchain? And what is the fundamental value proposition of this technology? You would probably get at least 8, if not 10, completely different answers. And this is something that the blockchain community really does need to, in my opinion, systematize. But if you ask me what a blockchain is, it's an event log that's capable of ordering itself, authenticating itself, most fundamentally operating across company firewalls. And this enables for us a value proposition that is new and distinct and unique within the spectrum of data management solutions. And that is, it provides us with a data management solution that can operate across companies in a collaborative manner. And this is really the core, in my opinion, the core value proposition of what this technology can offer. So now we come sort of full circle here, and I'd like to take about 10 minutes and compare and contrast traditional or previous generations of technology and how legal tech companies can leverage them with how a legal tech company can leverage a blockchain solution. So let's start with a fictional company or hypothetical company that might want to re-envision how wills operate. And this is something that a lot of people might be interested in. It's relatively formulaic, it's relatively capable of being templatized, and so this is something that might be quite interesting for someone to build. Now, if you are a startup in this environment and you want to take a previous generation of technology and build a solution around this, you'll have a database at the back end that will be running within your AWS or Google Cloud system, and that database will have fundamentally all of the main components of a particular will. And potentially the output of your process is a paper or a PDF that you email to your client, or potentially not. But the real challenge here for the customers of this fictional legal tech company is that startups go away. And startups get bought, startups change the lines of business, and pivot and do a range of other things. And if one is talking about one will, that creates a big challenge, because I might make a will today and it doesn't really come into effect for, let's say, another 40 years, but maybe in various cases less than that. And the reality is that a technical startup lasting 40 years, the chances of that are near nil. Not exactly nil, but definitely near nil. And if what you are doing is outsourcing to a single company what some critical information, some critical data, or a critical legal instrument, that creates a very, very large challenge. Now, that same will startup might choose instead to leverage a blockchain-based platform that is ran by multiple companies, and those companies might even potentially be competitors of this particular startup. It might not be, but by enabling and leveraging a data framework that runs collaboratively by many organizations. What you end up doing for your customers as the Wills startup is that you effectively distribute the risk that any one company will go away very, very effectively. And this makes it significantly easier for you to consider, or for your customers to start to consider how they might actually leverage or value-add services as a startup. And then we also can consider more close to my heart in the transactional law area, what a contract management solution that leverages traditional tech might enable. And we have tons of these that exist within the market. For example, within the insurance space, we have a whole range of contract administration systems. Typically, we call them policy administration systems within the insurance space. Those run within the insurance company's data set. Me, as a customer of an insurance company, I had no idea or ability to actually interact with that with the data that has anything to do with that contract, unless the insurance company decides that they will allow me to interact with that. And this is for situations where I am an individual consumer and the insurance company is a big company. This might be okay. This might be frankly more efficient than trying to leverage a collaborative data infrastructure system. And because me as an individual, I might not want to actually participate in this data management solution by operating my own node on a particular blockchain. However, that insurance company is highly unlikely to only sell to particular insurance policies to individual consumers, unless they were very small retail focused provider. They also probably have a whole range of very large businesses in which they're providing quite complex risk instruments for. And in that situation, you have a very different scenario. You have a scenario where you have an equanimity or near equanimity of market power, and you have a near equanimity of systems complexity. Because in, let's say, a business disruption insurance scenario for an airline, the airline company on the one end of this particular contract has a whole range of systems that need to input into essentially the fulfillment of the particular contract policy. Whereas also the insurance company has a whole range of systems that need to relate to this particular policy or contract. And in this scenario, you start to unlock one of the real, you begin to be able to leverage what blockchains can fundamentally do as a value proposition, which is to enable a data management solution that is collectively managed across in this example, the airline and the insurance. Where both companies can plug in their systems into a common framework, and then they can all input into that whatever the data they need that relates to the fulfillment of particular contracts. Now, why is this interesting? Well, it's interesting because in the scenario where in the traditional or previous generations of technology, scenario around contract management, you don't have an ability to understand where are we within this contract. In other words, the general counsel of the insurance company has to rely solely on the systems of that insurance company to understand that insurance company's risk with relation to their contractual instruments. Whereas when one is looking at a blockchain-based solution where counterparties are also participating in understanding the data around the particular contractual instrument, So if we take a step back, what blockchains can enable for legal fundamentally breaks down into kind of three categories. And this is where we're seeing the market at a very entry level. Blockchains enable collaborative registration of things. These things could be land titles. These things could be proof of existence of a particular document or record. It could be a registry of intellectual property rights, and a whole number of other registries. And registries are interesting. They don't really automate stuff too much, but they do enable one to essentially assert that something happened at a particular time. And the real fundamental idea of most of the registries use cases that we see within the context of legal plus blockchain are this idea that we want to be able to timestamp when a particular thing happened. A land title was transferred from X to Y at time Z, and this is helpful. And I think it's one of the areas that is relatively new. We can do this sort of at an ecosystem level. These registries, particularly where you do not have a government actor with a digitized system, are quite interesting. One of the challenges that a lot of these use cases butt up against is, for example, in the land title use case, which is often cited, typically I don't see tons of value there, because in most of the cases, most of the time, one has a government has pretty much sole responsibility around maintaining land title records, and that governmental system, in many instances, including in many developing countries, and after I left Vanderbilt, I worked across a number of countries in Africa, and so I've seen this in real time, that even in many developing countries, you have electronic records that are maintained by a government. However, this isn't always the case. There are a number of things in which the government typically does not have either a digitized registry of these things that have significance, or one needs to sort of distribute out the registration of these things across across a single government sector. We've seen in a range of scenarios, for example, loan perfection registries being a good example of how registries can be leveraged and then maintained by an ecosystem, queried by any actor that needs to understand the particularities around, for example, in this example, loan perfection. The second area where we see some big movement is where Peter works, where we work at Monax, which is in the transactional law area. And while I don't want to speak for Peter, the good thing that we at Monax are driving towards is to be able to, number one, re-envision how transactional law is practiced, with a particular focus on moving away as much as possible from bespoke, hourly-based bespoke creation of documents, and much more towards legal product development. And I'm saying that with some level of particularity, and by which I mean leveraging technology, leveraging scale, leveraging templates to have to maintain and build products that can be used by many multitudes of individual users on a particular system. And then where I think that this technology is going and will enable probably within the 5-10 year horizon is around much more complex assertion that one is in regulatory compliance. And so I think the sort of third big area where blockchains will have something to say within the legal industry is around regulatory compliance. and sometimes this links with the registry's use case, and sometimes it links with the transactional logic use case, and sometimes it's completely independent of these. And one can imagine that these system maintained collected data infrastructures, particularly when have processing capabilities that are provided by what we call smart contracts within the industry. These things can to not only automate but provide some real technological capabilities around regulatory compliance automation, and that will sort of be kind of the final big piece, at least in my opinion, as to where this technology is going to have some big impacts. So I think I have 5 minutes left, but I'd like to stop there and see if there are any questions, and if not, hand it over to Peter early.
Questions of Casey? You have a world-class legal technologist. It's time to pin him down. John?
Yeah, so we see blockchain as a new.
Hold on, I hear a speech coming.
Oh.
So.
Oh yeah, sorry. I'll hold it. Go ahead. Thank you. Yeah, so we see technology really, blockchain really technology really innovating, and what you're alluding to about having blockchain become the distributed ledger, taking on the trust in the legal system. My question is, how do we know that within 5 years, technology itself doesn't basically disrupt blockchain itself?
You heard that, Casey?
No, I heard none of that.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Well, his question was, since blockchain, in your view, is going to be very pervasive and create an enormous amount of opportunity going forward, as well as challenges, how do we know, the question is, and this comes from an AI engineer, just so you know, this is not one of us dummies off the street. He wants to know, how do we know that technology won't disrupt technology and blockchain itself becomes obsolete or infirm within 5 years at the rate with which technology develops? Fair summary, John? Go ahead.
Well, a blockchain today does not equal a blockchain 6 months ago. I mean, the blockchain ecosystem is constantly disrupting itself and evolving. But if we, and this links with what I was saying, the sort of middle section of my talk with about how we define blockchains. If we define blockchain as collectively managed data infrastructure, that idea is relatively simple to understand, and I don't think that idea is going to go away. Obviously, the technology on which the technological components which make up the stack that one would use to accomplish that value proposition, that is constantly evolving and constantly changing, and I do not think that technological innovation is going to slow down. I think that indeed it will accelerate over the course of the next 5-10 years. So, and I don't think that what we currently call a blockchain as an individual piece of software and as a sort of individual network, in 5-10 years, they will not look anything like what they look now. But as with most technological innovations, I think that it will evolve slowly. But as to the idea and fundamental value proposition of collectively managing data infrastructure, that's probably, in my opinion, it is solving very, very real problems, and I don't think it's going to go away as an idea, even though the technology itself is constantly changing on a component level.
You just follow up on that, right? So
it's a little bit of a non-answer, but anyway.
yeah.
He's got a follow-up, so we're going to give him the opportunity to speak to the presidential press corps. Go.
Yeah, so for instance, the application of using blockchain as a registry.
I'll repeat it, Casey.
Recording wills that need a very long time frame for their execution. I mean, I guess the question is, it's not so much that blockchain technology is definitely evolving. The implementations are what are evolving. If I record a will today, current blockchain, as you say, 6 months from now, that blockchain might be out of date. It's the same.
Okay, let me take this in pieces because an engineer is talking and I'm a lawyer. I met calculus and I decided
I'm
not to
with
be an
it so
engineer.
far. I
Okay.
can get better now for whatever reason.
Okay, well, you heard him then. Go ahead. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, no, so the question is like, is there work right now in the blockchain in legal tech to solve that problem, basically, that, we used to store files on floppy disks, don't store files anymore, right? And things have evolved. I've lost my files on floppy disks, unfortunately. So how do we ensure that, if we're going to entrust blockchain to be the contract execution, verification, distributed trust, basically, how do we ensure that blockchain, the blockchain that we record our contracts on, will still not cease to exist, will inherit basically all the properties of whatever future evolution comes?
Did you get all of that, Casey?
I got most of it.
Okay.
It's an engineering challenge around migration, and how does one enable collective upgrades of software while retaining historical records. And pretty much every piece of block software essentially has an upgrade path for various components. And one of the advantages of the way that blockchains are structured is that you can, if you want to upgrade, for example, a data model in the future, it does not necessitate that data models on your historical events that have been logged in blocks need to maintain that same data model. And number one, and then number two, there's sort of three big components of a blockchain: the peer-to-peer communication layer, the application state, or historical record, and pretty much every piece of blockchain software is able to upgrade one of those components semi-independently of the other, which is typically what you need to do to future-proof what you are doing. But blockchainers in general take a very, very long view as to what they are trying to build. And within the software industry, within the blockchain software industry, this is something that is taken very seriously. However, it is, for those that aren't building blockchains themselves, you're right to point out that there is a certain element of trust here. But speaking as a company that has been building blockchain clients and software specs for well over 3-4 years, and knowing pretty much everybody within the space, and saying that everybody takes that very seriously.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Thank you, Casey. Please tell Casey thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Casey, I'm going to move over to our other compatriot here and see if we can get Peter on. Peter, are you there and can you hear us?
Have fun.
Have you unmuted yet, Peter? Are you okay? Let me unmute you for sure. All right. Are you able to hear us without feedback?
I can, yeah. Sorry, I was going to Casey with can you hear me okay?
I think so. Let's see. Go ahead, talk some more.
Right, I will just bring up my my slides. Are you able to am I able to share the screen?
Yeah, you should be able to just take it. Yeah. You see the, you want me to give you the privileges separately? Yeah, you got it.
Okay, wonderful. So hopefully everybody can see my slides. Thank you very much for having me, Larry. I really appreciate it. Great to hear Casey speak on the leaders, genuine leaders in this field. So,
Okay, now that we are close to having the technology worked out, Peter, hold on a second. We're just making sure everything is going through the ethosphere and connecting its heads where its tails should be. So give us a moment while I introduce you. Tunji, could you help us make sure that something is there? Because it's here, it's just not there. Don't know why. Peter Hun, you'll notice right quickly, is not from these parts. He's from
Okay. Yeah, I know.
the UK originally, where he got a law degree. Tunji, something?
I think it might be the projector. The computer's
I think
working.
the projector shows that it's running. Let's see. Ah, we got that. Let's see.
This is projecting, right?
Yeah, just. There we go.
Peter, sorry about that. Just a little few technical difficulties on our end.
No problem.
But Peter Hun came over and in the process of deciding whether he wanted to practice law, was completely consumed by computational law. And along with a colleague and the co-founder of CLAWS, Human Shadab, who is a professor of law at the New York University Law School, correct? Or did I get it wrong?
New York Law School.
New York Law School. They founded CLAWS about 2 years ago?
Yes.
Wow, time flies. And in the process, they have really shaken the world of computational law, blockchain, and law. Because they are showing the ability, as is Casey, of taking these concepts and creating executable contracts that take care of the friction by the way in which they are programmed, removing enormous amounts of time and cost from transactions through the technology, not just of blockchain, but artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, and the ability to stay in constant contact with the state of being of something, for example, in transit. Most recently, they showed how they could manage a fleet of trucks with the kinds of applications of CLAWS running, was it on the Autobahn in Germany, Peter?
Yes. Yeah, using, it was during the keynote at Bosch IoT World a few weeks back.
I'll let you tell the story about that, but it's just yet another way in which we have to be thinking as people of commerce, people of technology, and people of law, how these things have come together as opposed to living in our separate silos. And Peter is leading a lot of us in the way in which that thinking is taking place. So, Peter, we're not seeing you here, so that's probably not your fault, though.
Probably a good thing as well.
No. It's not a good
The
thing.
slides are what you were thinking to see.
Okay. Are you going to present, or are you just going to run through the slides and talk? It's up to you now. It's all yours.
Great. Well, thank you, Larry, for having me and for everyone for being here. I'm going to talk, as Larry mentioned, founded Legal Tech Startup Claws about 2 years ago. And during the process of founding that company, we quickly realized that it made very little sense for a group of engineers and lawyers to sit in a room building products for what we call smart legal contracts without, sort of collaborative, community-based environments around us. So I'm going to talk about something today called the Accord Project. We founded it in the summer of last year, and essentially it's an open source non-profit initiative for smart legal contracts. So the purpose of the talk today is to introduce everybody to that if you haven't heard about it already, and then dive in a bit deeper around the concept of smart legal contracts itself. So the Accord Project is, as I say, an open source non-profit for what we call techno-legal standards for smart legal contracts. And that means that contracts that you're familiar with today that are comprised almost entirely of natural language don't have this sort of data layer. And when you introduce that into the concept of contracting, there needs to be some semblance of standardization around what that looks like. So the data models, data scheme, and how you execute contracts, how you identify assets, parties, transactions that are either within those contracts or emanate from those contracts. So that the first purpose of the Accord project really is to set down these techno-legal standards. The second purpose is we don't want to just be a sort of talking shop around those standards. We actually want, as Larry alluded to earlier, we want practical solutions. So the idea is that we create an open source middleware layer for anyone to pick up and use for executing and building these smart legal contracts. So that's open source today. It's in its early stages, but it's ready to be used. The Accord project doesn't operate alone. We operate in conjunction with a number of law firms that I'll introduce to you in a bit. But we're also supported by some wonderful industry organizations. So Clio, I think probably everybody heard about the IEEE, which is the largest standards body, technical standards body in the world. The ICCM, which is the largest contract management body in the world. And then we work with various standardization initiatives on a sort of international and national level. So we're involved in the ISO initiative, but TC307, they call it, for distributed ledger technology. So what is the Accord project really tackling as a sort of problem? And it's really this. It's the problem of contract lifecycle management. I'm sure pretty much everybody in the audience is familiar with this at some level. It's a very resource-intensive manual process whereby contracts are managed. So the process of negotiating a contract, redlining that contract, executing that contract, signing it, storing it, then having to pull that contract out and manually reconcile that with external systems, so accounting systems to pull up an invoice, and then auditing that and the cycle repeats. So yeah, very resource-intensive, very manual, very time-consuming. And really covers two main problems that you don't have visibility or real-time visibility into what the state of your contracts are. The record that you have is pretty much the contract as it was signed, and then you can't use that contract state, if you will, in any external system because you don't know what it is. It diverges over time. So they're the two sort of main problems that we're tackling through the Accord project and through Clause, which is the sort of commercial entity that uses the Accord project technology. So when we talk of computable contracts and smart legal contracts, they really exist upon a continuum. So on one end you have text, so natural language text, where we are sort of currently, and then the other end you have contracts being represented in a complete formal representation, so in code of some sort. And at the intermediate point between the two, there are various ways that you can represent a legal contract, and I'm going to come on to a concept that we call a smart clause in due course, which essentially enables you to use some elements of a formal representation, so code within the body of a natural language contract. So we've all heard of the term smart contract. It's not really that well defined, and I think there's a lot of misconception around smart contracts and what we call smart legal contracts. So smart contracts, in a blockchain sense, we call it, are essentially stored procedures in a database that execute when cooked in a certain way. But a smart legal contract has some binding to natural language prose that will typically control a situation. It has legally enforceable rights and obligations. So it has all of the instances of a legal contract we're aware of. So the Accord project is firmly focused on obviously on the lateral, though it does include some aspects of the former. You can use smart contracts in a blockchain sense, as Casey mentioned, for legal contracts, but as I'll come on to, that's in our opinion not necessarily the case. You can run smart legal contracts without a blockchain. So to revert back to the Accord project slightly, it's really composed around sort of three pillars. So it's the technical standards, legal standards as to how we recognize smart contracts or smart legal contracts on a legal level. And then this sort of open source software middleware layer that embodies those technical and legal standards. Just as a sort of practical matter, the incorporated operates through a series of working groups. We have 2 technical working groups, and then we have 5 more practice area working groups that address various aspects of the use of smart legal contracts within industry. And as I said before, we're not just operating alone. The corporate is supported by some of the leading law firms in the world, many of which you can see on this slide, but there are others. And the idea is that we really create network impact on this sort of open source layer when law firms are supporting it, when law firms are running the software. And it just creates a sort of inclusive environment that everybody can pick up and use it, build their own applications on top of it. It doesn't tie anybody in. So the actual protocol itself comes to the technology side in a bit more detail. Currently, there are sort of three elements that we've open sourced. So there's a domain-specific language. So the code that you write that sits behind the natural language in a form or in a contract. The kernel, the engine for executing those smart legal contracts that can be run in a cloud, it can be run on an IoT device, it can be embedded in a node with a distributed ledger network. It's sort of applicable to many form factors. And then the sort of interface with distributed ledgers as well. So one of the underlying principles of the Accord project is that we're DLT agnostic. So the idea being that we don't have to pick and choose a particular distributed ledger implementation to run a contract on, and indeed you could run a smart legal contract that interfaces with multiple ledgers at any given time. So we work with 3 at the moment, currently Fabric, Hyperledger Fabric, and Ethereum. We're starting to work on R3's order shortly. I'm going to speak a little bit around the design principles that we've taken within the core project and why it differs slightly to other implementations that you may have heard of. So we start off with one of I think the most commonly said terms in this space, the blockchain-based smart contracts, not legal contracts. Casey and Mona wrote a wonderful piece about this quite a few years ago. So I encourage everybody to read that. But what that means is that we don't necessarily or shouldn't necessarily utilize think of smart contracts to run on a blockchain as sort of the only level. And what we do at the core project is separate the technology out into 2 levels. So we have a contract level where we verifiably execute the code behind that natural language in each contract. But when you need to interface with the distributed ledger, you can do so. That could be for executing a cryptocurrency transaction. It could be for transferring a token that represents an asset between 2 parties. So it could be a property transaction. It could be an intellectual property right. It could be pretty much anything. Why we take this approach is for a number of reasons. And then a lot of them are sort of technical, and a lot of them are specifically legal. So in our view, there's been this sort of assumed extension of Bitcoin to say Ethereum, and the idea that you can have a blockchain that be programmed in a very general way. Bitcoin has smart contracts, but in a very sort of rudimentary sense, out of purpose, and a very limited scripting language. Ethereum made that sure complete, so you can program pretty much anything on a blockchain. And then the assumption is from that using that technology alone is suitable for legal contracts. And in our opinion, that's not necessarily the case. What we do is we execute a lot of the contract transactions a second. If you execute on chain, there's an order of magnitude performance increase that's generated by doing that. There's also, as you've seen, I'm sure in the Ethereum community, a lot of it is around contract security and hack a smart contract. And what this means is that it may not be kind of ready for enterprise usage and certainly may not be ready for sort of full legal use today. The fact that you need to bind that code to a natural language representation of utility control in instances if there are disputes. So that's really important. Also, ideas around incomplete contracts theory. So the fact that you cannot account for every possible state of the world ex ante, and there are issues around self-executing contracts if you can't do that. There are good business reasons as to why you may not wish to enforce self-executing contracts. So say you had a commercial arrangement with a particular supplier and you had a month of contracts with that supplier, and 99 of those contracts were satisfied and there wasn't any breach. Would you enforce the one occasion where there was? Debatable. I would suggest that possibly you're willing to maintain a commercial relationship. And this idea that you may not need for global state consensus as a contract level. So the idea that every single node in that distributed ledger network needs to execute every single transaction that occurs within a contract. For legal contracts, we take the opinion that that's not necessary. What is required is deterministic and verifiable execution between the parties of that contract. But then when transactions emanate from that contract that do need global state consensus, so I'm not double spending a property of 123 Main Street, there's only one instance of that transaction, that's when you need that global state consensus. So we separate those two layers out. And the way that you build a smart contract in our opinion, as I alluded to earlier, is through the use of something that we call smart clauses. So the idea that you can take a natural language contract that you currently use, and you can add executable elements, smart clauses, to that document to perform or to automate some functions. So if that's a FI contract again, it could be a dynamic pricing clause that changes based on delivery date. So if the delivery date is missed, then the price may decrease, or it may be because goods aren't shipped in appropriate conditions and monitored by an IoT sensor. Humidity or temperature is too high, and you can modify the price based on that. You can have extension of guarantees. The possibilities are pretty endless. So that's one of the sort of fundamental design principles that we take, is that you can have these smart clauses in a document, and you can connect them up to, as I say, any DLT platform, but also a variety of APIs for data in those smart clauses to automate the execution of that particular element of the contract. So I'll just dive into a bit more on the anatomy of a smart clause. So a smart clause can be comprised of essentially definitely 3, but possibly 4 components. So in the sort of top right up here, you see the logic that sits behind the natural language here at the bottom. So you essentially parameterize, as Katie mentioned, the natural language text, and these parameters are linked to the executable logic behind it. You have a variety of integrations that provide data to that logic. So it could be IoT data, so they work in space, but it could be any data source. And then you can have blockchain-based transactions. So that could be on the DLT platforms that I mentioned earlier, or it could be back to any APIs. So an example would be of updating an invoice, because that price change needs to be recognized within the invoice. It could be automating a fiat currency payment, Stripe or PayPal, for example. And then you can also do a lot of really interesting things with smart clauses that don't data that is relevant to the execution of the contract, but you could automate sort of administrative functions as well that aren't between the parties, but that we call them sort of party side actions. So it could be updating your ERP systems, updating your management systems, for example. Just to kind of make that more technical in your audience, a bit more sort of realistic. This is an example of an actual contract around for a large credit card company, where we essentially automated a lot of their merchant agreements. Essentially, a merchant agreement is an agreement that they have with every merchant that accepts that particular credit card, and they wanted to automate calculations for volume discounts within that agreement. So if you had $4 million of transactions on that particular credit card, then you would fall into one discount rate. If you had $1,001, then you would fall into another bracket, etc. So that all they could do is add a smart clause, volume discount into that merchant agreement, and automate that sort of whole process. You could do that without a blockchain implementation, but we did just to demonstrate that it's possible. But what it really shows, in our opinion, is that it's smart legal contracts hold a variety of possibilities. They can be used with a blockchain, they can be used without a blockchain. The possibilities are really sort of endless. And I'll finish off just by saying that this is all open source, that you can pick it up on the GitHub. And just to make it a bit more sort of realistic, I can show you, I won't execute it, but I can show you what that sort of looks like. So this is a fragile code. We're using accelerometer data to track whether fragile goods could have been damaged within the supply chain. This is the natural language that I mentioned sort of earlier on the slide, and this is the executable model without of that natural language. So I can change parameters within this. So instead of damages $300, it could be $500. The parcel through that it will verify that is a valid value there, and update it as you see the penalty for late delivery there. But then if I try some nonsense, it will come back and the parcel say there's a syntax error. So this is live, you can use it today, and it's completely open source. And our hope is that legal industry can pick it up as they are doing, but then anybody else can utilize this technology, because it's only through collaboration that we really get the results. Happy to answer any questions.
We're singing our song, Peter. Questions, anybody, while Peter's with us? Yes, you want to speak it so I can repeat it, or you want to speak it loud enough so he can hear it?
I'll try to speak it loudly.
Okay.
So how do we, because it's open source, the public can access it, how do we ensure that there isn't a private entity that will affect it or cause some...
Yeah, great question. Peter, she wants to know, because it's open source, how do we know that a private entity won't somehow affect it, make it nasty, nefarious, or corrupt it, or steal it, or whatever?
Yeah, great question. So the open software is maintained by the Accord project. So you can't modify the code base without you can add pull requests and you can suggest amendments to the code base. But it's managed by the Accord project. So that essentially stops anyone making nefarious sort of edits to the code base. And this is sort of very similar to any open source project. So databases, MongoDB, for example, is open source. Ethereum, Ethereum is also open source. So yeah, it's very similar to any other open source platform.
She has a follow-up. This is the presidential conference, please.
So I'm using a Craig Venter's project.
Hold on, she's using Craig Venter's project,
The Human Genome Project.
the
as
Human
like
Genome Project.
as a correlative to this question I'm about to ask. But it was at one time private or public open source system where people can input codes of genetic codes in there and the public can access it. Eventually it became public, but only the public can access a limited sections versus the private sector gets to access the entire.
She's raising the great question that we all want to wrestle with and wrestle to the ground and make everybody happy. And that is the question of the democratization of data. Because there is some data, healthcare data specifically, that must be private, cannot be exposed. It's illegal to expose it to anyone else unless the person whose data it is chooses to do so. But associated with it is a great deal of data which would be useful for everybody. And how do we deal with that dilemma? So Peter, do you have ideas to help us solve that problem?
Yeah, I mean, the idea of separating out those two layers means that commercial data is kept private between the parties where that data needs to be shared. But we also have technology mechanisms for ensuring that if data is particularly sensitive to one party but needs to be shared for the benefit of the contractor, that can remain private. So we're working on a lot of those problems currently. In terms of open sourcing data that's beneficial for everyone, you can statute that data on a DLT platform, but it's not something that we're directly addressing it. Ultimately, it is a decision for the users whether they want to share that. And using this platform, they can if they want to, but it's not mandated.
Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Sweet, Peter, well done. Other questions before Peter goes back to whatever he's doing today? I'm sorry, AJ.
Peter, thanks for the presentation today. Question for you on executing the contracts off-chain. What technology are you thinking of using to execute the contracts off-chain? And is it another version of a distributed ledger, or is it a different type of process?
Yeah, great question. So the two sort of issues that we're trying to are deterministic execution and verifiable execution, so that you know that a contract will execute in a given way, and you can verify at any given point in time what the state of that contract is. So we're building what we call a contract graph. So it's a Merkle-directed acyclic graph that sits behind each contract. It's a bit like if anyone's ever used Git, Git distributed versioning system. What it enables you to do is store the state of a contract in its entire life cycle from negotiation through to signature, and then in that sort of post-formation stage from signature to completion. So that essentially has many properties that are similar to a blockchain, which is itself essentially a Merkle-directed graph as well. So you can liken it to a mini blockchain, if you will, behind each contract that's between the parties to that agreement. So that's how we deal with the sort of verification, and that's being built into a virtual machine that will act on that graph. So it will add objects to the graph, compute objects and add that to the graph, and so you get a sort of cycle between the sort of computation and the graph, but you're only acting upon that data structure.
Does that help, AJ?
Is it still distributed in that context, or is it different nodes that was it only one node that would interact with one node?
Yeah, you could run that. So each party to that contract would run their own copy of the graph, and then you essentially share state between the two. Or you could run it in a centralized service if you wanted to. So you could run it in AWS or Azure. So it gives flexibility.
Well, you got a smile out of AJ, so I think you satisfied his itch. Anyone else? Yeah.
So if most of the work is being done off-chain, what is actually being stored on the public blockchain, and what is the advantage of, if it's just like a hash, if it's just a acknowledgement of the existence of that contract, what's the advantage of putting that on the public blockchain?
Right, so that's the reason for executing off-chain is that you may want to execute on sort of private chains, business network, like Maersk and IBM are doing. I think Justin mentioned that earlier. It doesn't necessarily need to be a sort of public chain. So there are a number of things you may want to store. So proof of existence may be one, as you mentioned. So that may be the fact that you signed a particular contract, or it may be that a particular state will change in that contract. It may be that you want to execute a transaction on chain. So it may be the example was on one of the links that I put in the deck that we did of a supply chain transaction where you're executing a transaction between two parties to a contract where you want to store the entire state of that contract between other members of that business network. So it could be a logistics provider and a supplier, but then the supplier and the end user or the consumer may want to know what's going on in that supply chain, but you don't want them to have knowledge of the actual contract itself. So that's one of the fundamental benefits of executing off chain, is that you keep all of the content of that contract private, but you only share what you need to other members of that business network.
That work? He's happy too. Boy, you can tell. You know how to answer questions, Peter. Alex is about to answer one. Here's a tough one.
Oh, I doubt it. I'm pretty new to this area, but and forgive me if I just missed this kind of clarification in the presentation, but a couple of times it seemed that you were making a distinction between contracts and legal contracts. Did I see that on your slides?
The distinction that appeared to be on some of the slides between contracts and legal contracts.
So I guess the question is, I'm a little confused by that, right? Because every agreement it's a legal agreement. Whether the question is whether a court will choose, to have some kind of an enforcement, domain over the agreement. Whether just regardless of whether or not you may desire that it's outside the purview of a court, the court may very well say, well, I can enforce this and arbitrate it, and someone can challenge this in my court.
And it could be void as against public policy.
Right, exactly. So I guess what is that distinction? And
yeah, he's curious, how can that be a contract that's not a legal contract?
We make a distinction between smart contracts and smart legal contracts. So in the latter instance, they have all of the instances of a contract involved. So intention to create legal relations, consideration, all of those types of things has been, typically there's an offer and acceptance. It's smart contracts in the blockchain sense, may not have that. So they may be part of a distributed application, for example, that doesn't have those agreements. But that's a fundamental distinction we're making on one level. On another level, it comes down to making contracts that are legally enforceable, so that you can take that contract to arbitration, or you can take that contract to litigation, and you have the natural language text, and you have the executable logic that is performing some function behind that contract to automate various aspects of it. So they're the two levels of sort of what we mean by smart contracts versus smart legal contracts.
Does that help, Alex?
I think so. So it's partly formalities, I suppose, regarding the transaction process, but ultimately everything is subject to court's jurisdiction if they determine it is, right?
Maybe Peter, if I'm understanding correctly, and maybe the last person in the room to do that, if a contract is only written in code, can you take that to court? Or must it?
In our opinion, you could, but it's for expediency, it's unlikely that many judges are going to be able to understand what sort of It's very possible, but it's just you probably want in good practice to have that natural language that will control in a given situation. So the code that sits behind it is executing some aspects of the administration of that contract.
And so it could very well be, and we have a couple of comments here as well. It could very well be that the code is not complying with the language that would ultimately be enforced. Correct?
That's very possible. You could have divergence between the two, in which case you would want that natural language to control.
Right, and the last interesting thing is the inputs, right? Whether, because, right, if it's automatically executable, it's executing with some trigger.
Right.
What is the trigger? Is that subject to dispute? Probably, it's a matter of fact, right? So.
Well, we're lawyers here, see, Peter, we're getting way down into the weeds, but the questions are good ones, and AJ wants to respond, and we have another response.
Yeah, so I struggled with the same thing you're asking, and the way to interpret it in the technical sense. The smart contract is what they're really setting up as code, and they're giving it a label of smart contract, but they don't intend to mean it is legally a smart contract. And so in the context of us lawyers, you can think of it as terms and conditions in a standard form agreement. It doesn't become a legal contract until two people step in, or two parties, and agree and then make the terms specific to what they want. Mm-hmm. And so in the same way, you can go on that standard in GitHub and plug in the number and plug in any other items, and it generates it, then that part becomes your legal binding contract. The form that is there is a smart contract in development code, but not a legal contract yet until people use it and agree to it.
It's not a contract, it's just a form.
Correct. More specific, it's like, it's technical logic.
Yeah.
It has no natural language behind it. So what Clause is adding, or what Accord is adding, is the natural language behind the technical logic that's just pure code. A smart contract is just pure code. There's no sort of interpretation behind it.
You could actually just call a smart code.
Smart language is code, right? I mean, it's just different.
Okay, just so everybody can hear, both here and wherever they are, let's either speak up so everybody can hear, or let me translate for not only Peter, but for everybody else. So I think the conversation here has come to a good outcome. Is that right? Sure. There any remaining questions?
Yeah, so
hold on just a second. To the extent that you heard them, Peter, were you in concurrence with what you heard about the difference between smart? Yeah, go ahead.
I think I heard AJ mention, I think you were talking about the sort of smart contract being a misnomer, because it's not necessarily a contract that's law, which is definitely a point to make here.
And I'm going to say that from the beginning of my knowledge of what Peter and his colleagues are doing, they've been very sensitive about the inapplicability of the phrase. They would prefer not having to use the words smart contract, because it doesn't convey what is really intended. And we can't fight that battle because it's in the vernacular. Pardon me?
From a legal perspective, do not convey what the words.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so we had another editorial comment that's is spot on. So we struggle with language in all of this, especially as law and technology come together. That's why these conversations are so critical, because we can't go off in different angles thinking we understand each other when we're talking about apples and oranges. Yeah. Fair? Okay, yes, sir, your comment.
My question is, so what's the current state of the smart contracts in terms of what the difficulties, maybe not on the technical difficulties, but difficulties from the legal perspective on implementing this and starting to use the smart contracts in the real world.
So see if I can ask it the way you intended it. Peter, he wants to know what's the impact of the legality of implementation of these kinds of arrangements. Are they running into difficulty in terms of legal enforcement? When implementation takes place, do we have to worry about whether it's going to be legally enforceable? What's the impact of the law on this technology today?
Yeah, I mean, so we're just from a practical perspective, we're starting off relatively simple. So that sort of volume discount example that I showed is sort of as far as we've got in practical implementation And essentially it's performing administrative functions behind the contract itself. So we haven't come across, at least in the wild, any real sort of issues there. But there's certainly possible problems that can occur down the line. So I think you mentioned one, Larry, of code and natural language divergence. We try with the technology to limit that. So there's a model that sits behind each of these clauses and each contract, which means that it becomes quite difficult to have the logic diverge. But it is very possible. So those types of issues we need to be cognizant of as an industry going forward. So practically, not too many problems, but there's certainly some coming.
And I think if I can just validate the work that you're doing, Peter, and applaud you for it, that's one of the purposes behind the Accord project, is to bring all of these expertise to the same table to see what standards might need to look like as we go forward into this Wild West where no one has been before, to minimize both the legal and the technological issues by working together and getting as much input as we can. And although Peter didn't say it, there's also an educational component to the Accord project. And we're very proud to be a part of that at Vanderbilt. There are other law schools that are also trying to help build curriculum around how you teach lawyers and law students about smart contracts and blockchain. And so that's just launched literally last week. And so these are good things. This is the best time of my life to be a part of these kinds of things. So there's a lot to do, but people like Peter are leading the way for all of us, but nobody's doing it by themselves. That's the thing that's most critical. John?
Yes, I was wondering, I mean, most legal contracts, I'm assuming, are not natural language in a sense. So is the Accord project taking and mapping from the core logic to the natural language?
The question is the Accord project, is the Accord project mapping from the core logic to the natural language?
Yeah, is it natural, question is it a natural language generation project?
Is it a natural language generation project?
In other words, are you processing language to the contract or the other way?
Go ahead, Peter.
No, we're not generating natural language from the logic. Essentially, you would have the natural language template, and you parameterize that, and there's a model that sits behind that references those parameters, and then the model is linked to the logic. No, we're not generating natural language from code. We think that because legalese and the natural language is so sensitive, any errors in that mean that we're going to get into the issues that were sort of mentioned on the previous question of sort of divergence between natural language and code. We can exacerbate that situation rather than sort of minimize it. So we don't take a sort of natural language generation approach. Possibly in the future, but not currently.
Well, on this topic, what a world we live in. I just got a question on my watch from London, because Alex Smith has been watching all of this. If you know who Alex is, he's Chief Innovation Officer, not a lawyer, for one of the largest law firms in the world and part of the Magic Circle. So he asks us, question for Peter. Here we go. Ready?
Get ready?
Yeah, be ready. Are smart contracts currently on operational BCs backed by law or there to make the BC work? So code to make it run, but not yet tested by traditional contract issues.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of potential issues that arise with these on legal contracts. So one that we've been looking at is this issue of mistaken code. It raises its head at pretty much every turn. And how does existing legal document interface with that? So the issues of unjust enrichment and mistake are pretty pertinent here. So we can't solve all of the issues on sort of a technology level. It depends on humans to get involved to sort of do the right thing, and that's part of the reason why the incorporation exists, to create these sort of standards behind the implementation of legal contracts and minimize those. So yeah, there are a ton of potential issues of the interface between smart legal contracts and legal doctrine, but the approach we've taken is to mitigate that. So we don't, for example, have self-executing states on chain. We separate out that computation and enforcement layer for that very reason, because you may not want to execute a payment based upon a contract, particularly if there's sort of an error in the code. You want to safeguard against it. And if you execute everything on chain, then there's potential problems there. So that's part of the reason why we've taken the design approach that we have.
Thank you. Another question or two? I saw Tunji's hand.
I've just got a brief, pretty, I think, simple question. I'm just curious. I think I'm in awe of the broad-based coalition you built at the Accord project, and I think it's obviously important to establish the standards. But I wonder if there's a plan at the tactical level for implementing the technology at the organizations. It's one thing for the organization to opt in, but what about the end users, the individual attorneys who are still baffled by the technology? What's the plan?
Did you hear that, Peter? Okay.
Yeah, it's a great question. So
I'm going to be taking notes now. Go ahead.
Yeah, so education is a big component here, and we're seeing two approaches within law firms. So one is educating lawyers to code, which we're helping out with in a few firms, and then the sort of second approach is that law firms are beginning to bring in or develop in-house technical departments to sort of assist with this. So obviously they also
in-house what? Excuse me, Peter. In-house what kind of departments?
Sort of technical departments. So programmers to assist and work with lawyers on smart legal contracts.
Got it. Thank you.
Function separation. You have a lawyer and a developer sitting together to develop smart legal contracts. So that's sort of the second approach, and the first approach is actually teaching lawyers to code. And the Accord project assists with both, but we're trying to make design decisions that make it as easy as possible for lawyers to sit down and build smart clauses within contracts. So, as I mentioned in the presentation, a domain-specific language is built specifically for lawyers. So you're not using an high-level general-purpose programming language like JavaScript. You're not using necessarily a blockchain-based domain-specific language, say Solidity, for example, or Ethereum, which is great, but it's kind of a mix between a high and low-level language that doesn't really suit the needs of lawyers. So this language is built specifically for the legal industry, specifically for smart legal contracts. And one of the main things we're working on through the working groups is developing that language through various iterations. So yeah, education is the answer.
Yay, education's the answer. Before we get too far into the weeds, I just need to let you know we have 50 minutes. I would like about 20 of that to add to this conversation, so that we could then hopefully spawn a really rich dialogue. But if you're ready to go there now, that's fine. It's your call. Okay. Peter, if you want to stay around, please feel free. We'd love to hear you weigh in on anything. But I want to take this whole conversation and give it a more broad context. I want to put it in the context of something radically different is changing in our world today. Radically different. John, you have a question?
I was going to say, Larry, do you want to take a short break for people that
I need people to feel free to just take a break whenever they want to. Everybody can take a break. You can go get food. You can go to the bathroom. But I'm going to keep talking. So. Because my wife says that's what he does. Thanks, Peter. It's been our delight to have you with us.
remember reading, because that was when they were doing like a shipment of something based on.
When it gets enforcement handed out, these will be challenging.
Stuff is for the
Ordinary judges are not equipped to judge.
How's everything with you?
Good. I hear you're practicing with Simona.
Yeah.
It's not really like
We're still trying to see some quality of life. There's too much business.
Yeah, they need to develop that.
It's legal litigation.
Are you doing blockchain stuff?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, so. How's it going?
I thought I was live tweeting, but I realized I needed some sort of PhD or some shit I don't have. Yeah, I have no idea.
It's been a little crazy, yeah.
I was trying to tweet the question, I gave up.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
Tag your name.
let's continue because there's more context to this question and people can pick up wherever they need to. And anybody is free to leave, nobody is being held hostage, okay? Feel free to just do whatever you need to do. But I think there's a much bigger issue than just these insular, siloed applications of what we all experience. And it goes right back to where we started. How do we improve our parallax view? Because our singular, monocular view isn't going to work. And we heard that in Peter's remarks, we heard it in Casey's remarks, we heard it in Justin's remarks. But why is that? And are we even wise to think that we could continue to hold on to the way things have been for so long? Because that's going to be the battle. It will be a huge economic battle. Let me give you an example of how huge this battle is today in an industry not that far removed from law. Because healthcare, you just go down the street a little bit, and there's one of the world's leading medical centers that's called Vanderbilt Medical Center. No longer a part of the university because there was too much risk and there was too much opportunity for the two to coexist any longer. So where's the risk come from? Well, it's largely a part of this exploding technology that has incredible capacity to work with experts to heal diseases and save lives. But it's not working. If you were to go into Vanderbilt, as my wife and I have both done in recent times, not because we wanted to, there's a host of information about me in a variety of technology silos. In the average medical center, there are 75 to 100 different technologies that have a patient's medical information, and they don't talk to each other. So bad is the situation that the National Health Institute, or the National Institute for Health, years ago, did a study and said that on average, every day, the equivalent of 2 747s dive bomb into the ground full of passengers, killing 12 to 1,500 people every day, attributable to one thing: the lack of interoperability of that data. You're in the healthcare industry. You know this to be true.
Yes.
She says with glee. I'm not saying you're saying happily, but this is a fact. You take your life into your own hands when you go into a medical center, particularly if you happen to be unconscious at the time and nobody can speak for you because they can't find who you are. And they can't find how you've been treated, maybe for 25 years. They can't find any of that because all of that data about you, who owns it? Whose data is it? It's your data. Have you ever tried to get it? Have you? How successful was that? It's next to impossible. Because the people who have built these technologies, these gigantic organizations, have privatized the data that they've generated for one very solid, defensible reason. It's commercially viable. Yeah, and it kills people when you don't share it. But that's never changed anything. For 20 years, the National Institutes of Health has said this has got to be a problem. Matter of fact, Congress has passed an act that says this has to be solved by 2025. That feels really good, doesn't it? How do you feel about the next time you go to the hospital? Don't do it before 2025. And maybe it won't even be fixed by then. Just down the street, there is a organization called the Center for Medical Interoperability. Huge funding, gigantic amounts of money coming from the federal government, from the payers, from the providers. How do we solve this problem? How can we get the data out of the silos for the benefit of the patients for whom it is intended? That's a very decent question. And they can't yet. So if that's true in healthcare, is it any less true in law? No, it's no less true in law. Because where all the data resides, nobody wants anybody to have it. There's good reason for that in both places. Confidentiality, regulations, proprietary interests. But the question is, how are we going to solve this problem and bring health to people and justice to people with the power of technology trained on the enormous data out there, if it can be released so AI can do its work? And we've got technologists here. What does AI need to succeed?
Data.
More or less? Is there any limit to how much data?
Limitless.
It's limitless. So as long as AI, even the best technology in the world, is focused on a limited set of data, the results are insufficient. When there's more data to be had, if all the data could be dumped in a pool so that privacy were maintained as to that which must be secret, and the rest of that data stack is now available for AI to do its work. Does that make logical sense to anybody? Well, healthcare can't figure it out. I got to tell you, my time in London this week was like way over the top. One of the things I got to meet and I got to love, Shauna Hoffman, co-leader of Cognitive Legal, IBM Cognitive Legal. Another fancy word for, this is where Watson does its work for lawyers, or better yet, on law. And in January, Shauna woke up one morning to find that she had been signed to the IBM Quantum Computing Group. She didn't even know that was going to happen. But now the work they're doing in IBM Cognitive Legal is being brought into the quantum computing world. You thought that was theory, right? I want to share with you it's not. And that's why this is such an incredible time. So if you want to know more about my craziness, this is a piece by Richard Tromans, in my view, the most honest broker of AI and law journalism out there. Published Thursday. And he brought the dots together that I was hoping we could begin to see on Tuesday of this week at the British Legal Technology Forum. And he's brilliant because he saw the dots. He said, in order to get from where we are to where we need to go, this is what I heard today from all of these people. We need leadership and collaboration. So let's explore that. And if you want to know my craziness, go to the legal business world and take a look at the article they just published in their current journal about what I call radical collaboration, because that more fully speaks to what I'm going to summarize in the next few minutes, which is where I want us to then have a really robust conversation. So don't you feel sometimes, unless you're on the crest of the wave riding on the surfboard, that this is a pretty chaotic world? Maybe you can identify with a statement like this, because it was spoken by a lawyer, mind you, in a very chaotic time. It was Abraham Lincoln who spoke these words in 1862, when the Civil War had unfolded and this nation was tearing itself apart at the seams over issues that, in his view, needed to be resolved together rather than through coercive military might. He was pleading before the Civil War came to an end, let's do this together. Let's not kill each other trying to solve this problem. I think he was a visionary, but I think he's also speaking in a different way to our time, because we're in a pretty chaotic time. Forget technology, forget blockchain, forget law. How comfortable are you that the world's affairs are in good hands today? Me? Yeah, exactly. And don't we see that there's an enormous power play on, just like there was in the Civil War, for one side to win at the expense of the other, as if we all weren't going to be injured by the outcome. Isn't that what it feels like sometimes? So I would like to say that maybe there's a way through this, and I owe everything that I think about this to these two geniuses who are computer scientists at MIT. Eric Brinhofsson, I think that's close to how he pronounces it, and the other guy I can pronounce, Andrew McAfee. Brilliant computer scientists, researcher and a lecturer. And this is a book that tells me, oh, there is a way through all this mess. Because they said the first half of the machine age, from the advent of the steam engine until 2006, matter of fact, they date the first half of the machine age as ending in 2006. That they, and you can read it, they say all sorts of things happened that year that gives them reason to say, we've turned the curve. Because the second machine age, which they say began in 2006, is exponential, not linear. Meaning the rate of change cannot be predicted, it cannot be comprehended, and it requires a completely different set of standards and leadership and economic objectives, because the old way won't work anymore. Because the old way was a way of scarcity. And they're saying that if we can figure this out, we're moving into a world of abundance. And that's already happening, but we don't see that because our minds are focused on scarcity. The world's population is healthier now than it's ever been, more economically advantaged than it's ever been. Generally, not individually, and there are exceptions to every stereotype. But if you look at the data, you cannot dispute the fact there has never been less chaos than there is today. That's a premise, okay? But if that's true, we have to move from an era of competition where everything that's mine is mine, and I'll get as much of yours as I can, to an era in which maybe we can all have more if we share what should be shared. I know that sounds radical, that sounds politically unpopular, and you might find it offensive. I'm just asking you to hold it for a moment. Because this is Moore's Law. I mean, we all here know, we wouldn't be here if we didn't know Moore's Law. The computer whiz that in 1984 said this is the rate of change of the capacity of mechanical devices to process data. Initially doubling every 2 years, but then backed up to every 18 months. Not from the advent of the computer, but way back here, 1900, where the analytic engine was created, purely mechanical calculator. But from that point until 2020, that's the end of this projection, this is the rate of change with which machines have processed information better, faster, and cheaper. I mean, that's the whole premise of Moore's law. But he says it's going to die in 2025. It cannot survive 2025. So what does that mean? Well, if McAfee and his colleague are correct, and 2006 was the end of the linear era, put Moore's law on top of it. It fits kind of nicely. And then what does that then mean if we're moving into an exponential age? Well, it fits kind of nicely. Not to say this proves anything, it just illustrates a point. So if 2006 was the knee of the curve, where are we in 2018? Are we there? Are we there? Are we there? Does it matter? Exponential is exponential. And you can't tell where the next rate of change is coming from. It's just coming as fast as it possibly can. That's been a theme we've heard several times today. So this is the guy who coined the term. When we talk about artificial intelligence, I have to ask people, can you describe for me what you mean when you say that? Because I don't think we mean the same things all the time. But this is the guy who coined the term. So I kind of like to go with the guy who coined the term. He says that it's the science and engineering of making intelligent machines perform work previously performed by humans. That's pretty simple. So what does that include? Well, the calculator that I had as a kid, the telephone that Alexander Graham Bell came along with. I mean, you can see the scope and the scale of AI when you begin to think it through from his eyes. And he said further, as soon as it works, they stop calling it AI. And isn't that the truth? I mean, pull out Siri, pull out your phone. How much have we gotten accustomed to expect out of our machines that once we did, but now we're glad they're doing it for us? That's AI. So getting into a hard debate about whether that's real AI or not, I think is a waste of energy and time. Because this, I think, is a better way to think about it. There are basically three tiers. Now, you technologists here, you can outscore me hands down at any point on anything technological. As I said before, I was going to be an engineer until I met calculus, and I turned into a lawyer on the spot. So I don't do math. But there's artificial narrow intelligence, which is all we know today. There is no, and again, tell me if I'm wrong, artificial general intelligence or a machine that basically does what the human brain does, as opposed to very limited applications of what we call AI. Yes, sir?
Hey, I'm sorry to interrupt, and it's actually fixed now. Your screen was out of focus.
Okay,
It's
okay, thank you. That's okay, thanks for saying so. But then there's this thing that we all see the movies about, right? When the robots come to kill us in our sleep, the Terminators, the HALs, the robots are coming, the robots are coming. When superintelligence is equivalent to the capacity of the entire human population's brain working against our interests. We've never gotten to the second level. And if you're a technologist that is steeped in this, please tell me when you think we will. Does anybody have an idea when we'll get to AGI? Anybody know? Yes?
I mean, there's like Ray Kurzweil who think 2046,
Right.
year of the singularity.
That's the earliest I've ever heard anybody speak it. And because we're talking exponential, who knows? But if the earliest we'll see an AGI is the most vocal advocate for its estimate, I think I'm going to die before 2045. I don't know about you. So I'm not really going to be all that worried that the robots are coming to take my job, because my clients need me to be a better, faster, cheaper lawyer. My clients need me to deliver legal services that they can afford because they find value in the price that they're asked to pay, which is what Justin's doing with the law firm that asks him to bring technology products to the table because our clients expect it. So add that to the fact that, again, the IBM people say that digital data will double every day by 2020. And today it's doubling every 2 years. Again, they're predicting the exponential curve like that. Can you even imagine if the data dump that we get today is doubling every day? What are we going to do? Justin, what are we going to do?
Have faster machines.
We're going to have faster machines. So if we don't have faster machines, we're in trouble, right?
Yeah.
Because that data is critical for us to solve the big, hairy problems. Fair? So, okay, let's skip gears a little bit. We've already, I think, established pretty well, and I won't go into this much. What blockchain does is it transfers value. And again, the concept is simple. The concept of current transactions they're really made out of friction. I mean, we lawyers get a lot of money by making contracts, accusing the other person of breaking contracts, and then litigating the breach. It worked really well for a long time. And client said, I got to pay. But friction is inaccessible information, complex, inaccessible interactions, and stifled innovation. That's friction. What does blockchain do to it? Vaporizes it. Now I know that's a big, hairy statement. But when it is applied to the things that it can do, Peter can tell you, because they're doing it, they're vaporizing the friction in transactions through the use of blockchain, AI, and IoT, and a stack of technology that's just in its infancy. And it's not going to mature this year or next. But if we're not out there working as hard as we can to make it work well, we're going to get behind the curve because the data's not going to stop coming at us. So these are the 5 things I think that blockchain does, which are radically different. And if you just get the concept behind these 5 pillars, it's all about sharing information and working collaboratively, as opposed to hiding information and working competitively. So we have an economy in every particular that has built this world on competition and scarcity. And now there's technology that requires us to be collaboratively transparent and share our data. Who's going to win that battle? Because that battle is real. That battle costs people their jobs, their stocks, their fortunes, and people aren't going to sit still and let it be taken from them. They haven't done that in healthcare for the last 20 years. So why are they going to do it anywhere? So this is just an example. We know this. IBM processes 2.9 million invoices a year. Blockchain has reduced the dispute over those invoices from 40 to 10 days. And they've only added $100 million to their bottom line by doing one thing. Feels to me like a bit of abundance is out there. And that's just one teeny tiny application. So what happens if we all get our heads together and build some wholly big applications to solve some of the world's big problems like poverty? How about Sexual trafficking. That's a problem. There's got to be a solution. Why aren't we working on that? So how long can binary keep us going? Moore says it will not work after 2025. So quantum computing is that crazy idea that you can actually achieve a matter state of immobility, where a 1 is a 0, and red is black and alive is dead, all at the same time. And one of the greatest physicists who proponent of quantum thinking says, if you think you understand quantum, you don't understand quantum. It's beyond our minds, okay? But it's here. IBM Q is open source, available for anybody who wants to build an application, just like Claus, just like Tesla. Think about that for just a second. And if it's 100 times faster than traditional computing today, and it only functions at 20 qubits a second, that's how you measure quantum speed. And they've got a prototype of 50 qubit computer that they're ready to launch, and they're increasing their speed exponentially. The first quantum computer was 2 qubits. What do you think the second one was? 5. Yeah, a little bit more than exponential. And then what was the third one? 20. Well, it's 20, they say. I don't know. You know better than I, AJ. And then the 51, they don't even go in 5 increments anymore. Quantum computing and exponential growth is here. It's happening. And we better understand it because the problems are getting bigger, not less. So now let's look at law. 2 reports, you can have them both. Thomson Reuters last month gave the survey results from in-house general counsel from the largest corporations in the US. And these are their 2018 priorities. Number 1, less legal spend. Number 2, achieve success with number 1, with technology. Number 3, big problem, cybersecurity. I go back to look at the last 10 years of this survey and tell me what number 1 was until this year. Cybersecurity. So what made expensive legal and the use of technology more important to in-house counsel this year than it's ever been before? They don't have any running room. The CEO of Nike once is quoted as saying, I give my general counsel an unlimited budget every year, and every year he exceeds it. Those days are gone. Are they not gone, Teresa?
Oh, yes.
I'd love to tell you about these folks. They're on the right track. They're on the right train. They're going to make a huge difference because they're not buying that nonsense anymore. And many of us in this room aren't. Okay, so what's happening on the other side? This is the report that comes out just before the general counsel. This is data-driven report from large law firms giving their data to the peer monitor report every quarter anonymously. Every month, right? But then they do a quarterly report, you're right. But they do it, you all do it, don't you? It's anonymized. It's used in an anonymized way, right? So what is the story? Well, just one little glimpse. Last year, alternative legal service providers took $10 billion out of the pockets of big law. Well, what's an alternative service provider? They're not law firms. They're companies that provide legal services for a fee. Axiom. They're the big 4 accounting companies like PwC, Deloitte. They have not law firms, but providers of legal services that are employed by the company. And they're publicly traded. So when we get all gooky as lawyers about unauthorized practice of law, horse is out of the barn, guys. It's over. This is not going to go down. So what's going on? This is what the leaders of the America's largest law firms said in answer to that question. I don't know. It's like see no evil, hear no evil, feel no evil, pray no evil. Just ignore. Maybe finally this will stop hurting so bad. And then at the same time, they're told by the report from Georgetown, leaders, you're doubling down on a failing strategy. And these are the neuroscientific heuristics that you're being blinded by. When the data is right there and it's been there for 10 years. It's getting worse every year. So what are you going to do about it? It was the strongest call to action I have ever seen that very political report make. Read it, it's just astonishing. So what has that got to do with anything? One, leadership. We are in a different era of leadership than we've known growing up. We used to have that hierarchical leadership where the person at the top could tell everybody what to do and they did it dutifully. Doesn't work anymore. The postmodern era, think of some pretty high-powered, strong men, literally men, that are no longer with us. Gaddafi, Mubarak, run a tyrannical ship for decades because they could keep everything secret. What took those people down? What caused Gaddafi's death? What brought that on?
Free flow of information.
Yeah, this little thing, right? This little thing. Oops, not that thing. It's that thing. Right? Access to information in real time spread worldwide through social media. I love this. I'm not trying to be political, but I'm not even going to take a side. But who's giving the hardest challenge to the NRA today that it's ever seen? A 17-year-old who knows how to use social media to mobilize everybody in the nation who don't want to be shot in their schools anymore. I'm not pro or anti Second Amendment. It's there. But we know things can be done to stop this slaughter. And they aren't expecting us to do anything different. That's the power of shared information, collaboratively used to create an abundance of political might. I'm more optimistic than I am pessimistic. As sad as I think our state of affairs is, I have greater hope in another generation of people than I do my own. Okay, so what about that? You see that, what do you think? It's my desktop. I just have to look at it all day long. What do you think when you see that?
Innovation, closer to other people.
Innovation, what was the last phrase?
Closer to common people.
Closer to common people, yeah, because they're spacemen. Do you know what spaceman is listening to? Forever and ever and ever.
David Bowie.
Yes. Which David Bowie tune?
Life on Mars.
Yeah. So, and then you ask Elon Musk, why'd you do that? You know what his answer was? Oh, it was silly. Just silly. I was just having fun. Wait a minute. I got to put all this together in my head. You spent $500 million of your own money to do that for fun? I mean, I think we could all have probably things that we would want to do with money like that. But he could do it. And the question is, why or how? You know, Tesla is not a space exploration company. It's not a car company. It's not a battery company. It's not even a boring company. You know, we've got the rights now to bore the hole, to do the loop, from Washington to New York and back in a fraction of the time it normally takes. And it's already started. What kind of company is Tesla?
Technology.
Yeah, it's Tesla technology. What is the most important intellectual property that Tesla owns? It's technology, right? It's open source. Is it possible that cooperation, collaboration can lead to an abundance that is absolutely unimaginable to us? Well, Elon Musk thinks so. I think he's probably right. So it was about 3 weeks ago in London that CLOC put out its first analysis of how AI in law is currently being provided in 5 separate columns of different kinds of applications. The predictive capabilities, the analytic capabilities. Electronic discovery has been around for decades and it only gets better and better. And if you're a lawyer and you claim that you can defend a company or an individual and know nothing about electronic discovery, you're going to lose your license because it's unethical. Legal research. Ross was here yesterday. No, it was Thursday, wasn't it? Several of you were here Thursday. They're blowing and going. What they're doing with AI and legal research is just revolutionary. And one of its options is free if you want it. You don't have to be a lawyer to use it. It's free. Sounds like collaboration leading to abundance. So what are some of those tools? Well, Ross is research, Kim is automation. You heard from Claus. You probably don't know about introspection, but it's a deep learning tool trained on the data within a corporation to identify risk in that unstructured data that's generated absolutely every single day, and then ping the general counsel. This is one you might want to look at. This is a combination of conversations, of product liability claims. It doesn't fit the norm, and there's a risk attached here. And then, have you found Voltaire? Are any of you trial lawyers? Have you found it? Have you used it? What does it do?
Oh, I don't know if I have a very good explanation, but basically it has access to over 1 billion points of data, I think it is. So it combs the internet in a very quantum type fashion, particularly social media, to help lawyers as they are trying to seat jurors in a jury trial. And so it goes out, it finds all this data about the individual, where they live, who their mama was, whatever, just all sorts of information.
And how many active marriage licenses they have?
Yeah, that too. And makes that then pulled together in somewhat of an easy summary so that as the lawyer's sitting in the courtroom trying to select the jurors for their panel, they can pull that up and look at biases, maybe maybe they're a gun carrier and this is a murder trial and he's defending the murderer. They can look at all the different points of view that this individual has expressed and kind of their persona that is out on the internet, basically, and use that then in their selection process.
But it's not limited to that. You're absolutely right. Any trial lawyers here? Am I the only crazy one? AJ, would you not love to have had that when we're seating a juror? And then be able to say to the judge, Your Honor, I dismiss for cause. Because this woman has been a card-carrying NRA member for the last 20 years, and she's very public about her belief that gun restrictions of any sort should never be a part of the assessment of an individual. And that's the issue we have in our case. And you don't use your peremptories. What Voltaire gives you is all the cause you need to find the bias in anyone stepping into the jury box. questioning them on it, and if they lie, you really got them, right? Man, would I have loved to have that puppy. But what we've seen today is a call for a different world. And yes, I'm very proud of Dash. I'm not here to sell it because I can't. It's not sellable. But this is what it's doing. It's taking all of these various tools, and we have interoperability agreements with these and many more. Some of the folks are in this room. So what happens when you have a dashboard that brings all of this information to the same place at the same time and deposits it in a logical, structural way where you know you never have to go seek it again? And it's constantly interactive and the data flows both ways, so that in one place, the tools you need, from time and billing to accounting to timekeeping, they're all acting together in the same way in a seamless fashion. That's interoperability. Predictive, collaborative, across all platforms, automatically and in real time, with blockchain where appropriate, which is not everywhere, but on some occasions. And we're even thinking about an ICO. We're going to be really careful with that. But what if we needed to change behavior economically? And there are these tokens that you can earn by becoming more efficient. That might even get a lawyer's attention. I don't know, especially when the value of the token rises. The point is simply this: if it's not us, somebody's going to do this. Maybe because we're trying, somebody's going to do it better, faster, and cheaper than we are. More power to them. Because we've got to break this cycle. This is one of my favorites. Our CTO is an absolute genius. He said, Larry, I got to show you what you need to take to London and show them. Okay? He said, sentient AI. I said, okay, explain to me what you mean. He said, well, cognitive computing, affective computing. Training AI on the language people use in the notification system, a chat box, as they talk to each other to illustrate their emotional state when they express whatever they choose to express. Sounds creepy? Well, it's not intended to do anything but allow us to know when they don't like Dash. When they see the Dash is causing problems for them, I want to know it immediately. I want to fix that. So sentient computing with AI is telling us when they're using words and ranking them in terms of their emotional state, positive or negative. That's what the power of AI and big data can do. I love this guy. Did anybody know the blockchain kid? He's 17 years old. He lives in Minnesota. At 15, his mother almost died because when she went to the hospital with a stroke, that hospital couldn't find her data. And at 15, he said, I'm going to fix that. So last October, he won the New York City blockchain challenge with a group of people he had never met before he walked into that exhibit hall. Because he said, you know, we can solve that problem of interoperability. And so he prototyped an approach, and he's looking to do anything he can. So he's coming to Nashville. He'll be here at our event on the 30th of April because I want to take him. I want to take him to the people at the Center for Medical Interoperability and say, you might even want to talk to a 17-year-old. But you know who else I'm taking? Shauna Hoffman. Because IBM Cognitive Legal, she tells me on Tuesday, with the power of quantum computing and Watson, she said, we solved that problem last week. Seriously? Yeah, we solved it. Blockchain, AI, we can make medical information in its current state interoperable with the power of this kind of computing. So come join us, if you will, on the 30th. These gentlemen will be there. They're one of our chief sponsors because these guys get it. They practice law for how long?
Collectively?
Like, individually.
Individually, not long at all. It didn't take as long to figure it out. 3.5 years. And I don't think it takes long to uncover the issues with the way we deliver legal services today. Don't need to be a genius to figure it out. I figured it out within 3 months over being a summer associate.
It took some of us a little longer. So this is the time we're now at 12 o'clock. I know I'm willing to stay as long as you want to. We're going to turn this off because it can't capture conversation. But let's talk or go home, whatever you want. Because how do we do this? Yes, ma'am.
So, yes,
Excuse me. Just for the collective benefit of the audience, if there still is one, we're shutting down our broadcasts because we're going to have a conversation here, as we hope you will wherever you are. Oh, never mind.